Chapter 2409. She could tell that the man in front of her was truly enraged. It was to the extent that he lost control of his emotions and threw a punch at Song Enya. He had never hit a woman before. The heaviest slap he had ever given Song Enya was a slap. This time, however, he used his fist. It was clear that he was not going to give her any face. Wuxia said coldly, "I've said it before. I don't want to see you touch a single strand of her hair again. Could it be that the mother and daughter pair have ignored my words?" "Brother Mu." Song Enya burst into tears. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Why?" Wuxia laughed coldly. "Song Enya, must you be so despicable and make me look down on you?" Song Enya held her aching cheek as her lips trembled uncontrollably. Tears rolled down her cheeks pathetically. She could not take it lying down. She could not take it lying down. She had clearly decided to let go. But seeing a woman like Yun Shishir receive so much love from him, she was full of resentment and had nowhere to vent. She had lost everything, so could she not throw a tantrum? If Yun Shishir were to hear this, she would definitely sneer. What a high-sounding reason. Why should she endure her missy's temper then? Get lost. Wuxia mercilessly ordered them to leave. He did not care why these two were here, but he did not want to see them ruin his woman's mood. He was still looking forward to Yun Shishir wearing her wedding gown. Right now, he only wanted these two to get as far away as possible. Jiang Qiming wanted to say something, but when she saw Wuxia's vicious gaze, she stomped her feet in anger and turned to help Song Enya up. Like defeated soldiers, the two fled pathetically. Yun Shishir immediately ran to Yu, picked him up and checked him from head to toe. "Are you hurt?" Yu pushed her shyly. "No. I saw her kicking you. Please, how can she hurt me with that little strength of hers?" Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu is not that weak. He's healthy and uninjured. Wuxia walked to Yun Shishir's side, held her shoulders, and looked her up and down nervously. "What about you? Are you hurt anywhere?" Yun Shishir touched her hair and muttered, "It's just that my hair is a little messy, but there's nothing else. They were just blindly attacking and didn't hurt anything." Wuxia heaved a sigh of relief and asked in confusion, "Why are they here? She must have arrived earlier than us. She's probably here to pick out a wedding dress." "Choosing a wedding dress?" "Yes. I heard from Jiang Qiming that Song Enya is getting married to Mu Yanqing. She's hoping that she'll marry into the Mu family and become the matriarch." Upon hearing this, Wuxia laughed. With Mu Shumin suppressing her, she still wants to become the matriarch. She's a little naive. A few shop assistants immediately went forward to apologize. Yun Shishir waved her hand. "It's nothing. I was just bitten by a mad dog. How can I blame you?" The shop assistant burst into laughter and said, "After all, such an unpleasant thing happened in the shop and affected your distinguished experience. We're really sorry." "It's okay. I'll have to trouble you to try on the wedding dress next." Seeing that Yun Shishir's mood was not affected, Wuxia held the hands of the two little lads and said to her, "It's good that you're fine. You can try on the wedding dress first. Call me if there's anything." Chapter 2410. The shop assistant and Yun Shishir went into the fitting room to change into the wedding gown. The rest of the people quickly brought a mop to clean up the mess on the floor. The first gown to change into was a deep V-neck wedding gown. This wedding gown was especially troublesome because the hemline was very wide and long. It required two people to carry it, and there were many small diamonds on the back, so it was a little heavy. After a while, Yun Shishir walked out of the fitting room in the wedding gown. She couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. The moment she walked out, the two stylists standing outside the fitting room widened their eyes in shock. Yun Shishir had only changed into a wedding gown. She didn't even have makeup on her face. It was just a thin layer of makeup, but she still looked extremely radiant. Oh my God! As expected of the work of a top master, this wedding gown is really beautiful. Another shop assistant said. It also depends on who is wearing it. Madame Yun looks especially beautiful in this wedding gown. She looks very elegant and classy. She can totally control this aura. The group of people encouraged. Hurry up and let Mr. Mu see the effect. Yun Shishir was escorted out by a group of people. Wuxia was sitting on the sofa and reading a wedding magazine. Yu and Xiaoichen were bored out of their minds waiting. However, when they saw Yun Shirshir walking out in a wedding gown, they stood up in shock. Wow! Xiao Qian let out an exaggerated cry of surprise. He was obviously shocked. Even though Yu didn't make a big fuss like him, Yun Shirshir, who was slowly walking over, couldn't take her eyes off her. Her eyes were wide open and her mouth was wide open. She couldn't close it for a while. He quickly tugged at Muyaja's sleeve. Daddy! Look! Mommy has already changed into the wedding gown. Muyaja raised his head and looked in the direction Yu was pointing at. He saw a woman in a deep V-neck wedding gown with its white and holy hemline trailing on the floor. She exuded a luxurious aura as she walked over. She was as beautiful as a proud queen, yet she did not lose her elegance. Yun Shirshir stood rooted to the ground and held his hand generously. She looked at him a little nervously. Is it nice? Her beautiful skirt spread out on the ground like a pure white lily. She turned around slightly. Her back was also a deep V, perfectly showing off her charming shoulder blades and distinct back lines. At the junction of the shoulder straps and waist, there was an extremely delicate hand-embroidered pattern. The light shone on everyone. It was truly dazzling. There was a large embroidery pattern on the waist. Every stitch was inlaid with small diamonds, so it was very eye-catching. It was luxurious but also elegant. At that moment, Muyaja couldn't help but hold his breath for a moment. It was said that when the groom saw the bride standing in front of him in a wedding gown, he would be moved to tears. He didn't cry, but his chest was filled with warmth. He was like a youthful and ignorant youth who saw his beloved girl and was filled with passion. It was too beautiful. In this world it was almost impossible to find any words to describe this beauty. Yun Shirshir's skin was especially snow-white. It was like high-quality porcelain, but it was also as if it was frozen and could be broken by the slightest breeze. Such beautiful skin, coupled with the snow-white and pure wedding gown, was perfect like a work of art. He held his breath for a long time. When he finally regained his breath, he controlled his emotions that were about to overflow. He smiled and said, "Very beautiful." Chapter 24:11. Upon hearing this, Yun Shirshir couldn't help but blush. She pursed her lips and was a little confused by his one-word evaluation. Only beautiful? Muyaja walked over slowly and stood in front of her. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He had never been good with words, and it was rare for him to compliment something. However, he knew very well that this wedding gown's aesthetic value could only be realized when worn by the right person. After she put it on, he couldn't imagine how this wedding gown would look on anyone else. It was tailor-made for her, but it was a perfect fit for her aura. Other than the word beautiful, he really couldn't find any other cliché to describe it. Yu and Xiao Qian circled Yun Shirshir twice and exclaimed in surprise. Yu exclaimed, "This wedding gown doesn't look as good as the mermaid style, but I didn't expect it to look so beautiful on Mommy. I can't wait to see Mommy try on the mermaid style wedding gown. Who knows, it might even be beautiful." Xiao Qian said in surprise, "Mommy, I didn't know you could be so beautiful." Yun Shirshir broke out in a cold sweat, and a row of black lines appeared on her forehead. She couldn't help but pinch his ear. "Explain. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by Mommy can be so beautiful? Are you saying that Mommy isn't beautiful if she doesn't wear a wedding gown?" Xiao Qian giggled and snatched it away. He muttered, "Mommy doesn't care about her appearance at home. She wears pajamas and doesn't care about her appearance at all. If this goes on, Mommy will become an auntie in my heart." Yun Shirshir's face darkened completely. Yu couldn't help but hit him. "Mommy won't become an auntie. Mommy will never grow old." Xiao Qian hugged his head and cried, "I was just kidding." Yun Shirshir was speechless again. If she never aged, wouldn't she become an old monster? Although there were indeed many goddesses in the entertainment industry who did not age, they were all covered up with makeup through crazy sugar daddies and superb plastic surgery techniques. Their real faces had long aged. It was just that these female celebrities refused to accept that they were getting old. Therefore, they were unwilling to face their aging. What about her? Even if he was old, he would age gracefully. Yu suddenly pleaded excitedly, "Mommy, can you try the fishtail wedding gown? I really like that wedding dress. You'll definitely look good in it." Oh. Yun Shirshir looked into the distance. Yu said seriously. I've been studying wedding gowns for a long time, and I've always felt that the fishtail style suits mommy the most. He even drew a portrait of mommy in a fishtail wedding gown. Yu's drawing skills were quite good, so he drew a portrait of Yun Shirshir in a fishtail wedding gown based on his imagination. In the end, he was mesmerized after drawing it. He thought that mommy would definitely look good in a fishtail wedding gown. The shop assistant immediately brought the fishtail wedding gown over eagerly and suggested, Madam Yun, why don't we try the fishtail wedding gown for the second set? Yun Shirshir glanced at the starry-eyed Yu and nodded. Okay. After speaking, she couldn't help but poke Yu's head. Yu. Alright, mommy will fulfill your wish. Okay. Yu said excitedly. Mommy, do you need help? Yun Shirshir pointed at the sign on the door and reminded him. See that? Men are not allowed in. Chapter 24:12. Once they entered the fitting room, a few of the shop assistants excitedly asked her. These two Xiaobao twins are so funny. I've never seen such a cute child. Not only is he cute, but he's also very serious when he speaks, just like an adult. They're so cute. I'm so envious of having a pair of twins. If I could give birth to two babies at once, I'd be so happy to have such a pair of adorable little angels. Besides, not only are they adorable, but they're also very polite. They're like two gentle and refined little gentlemen. They're obedient and well-behaved. How old is your baby? Yun Shirshir replied. He's 7. 7. Only 7. They look very tall to me. The shop assistants looked at each other and widened their eyes in shock. Suddenly, they laughed and hurriedly said, My baby is also 7 years old. However, compared to your baby. She paused and her tone changed. She sounded a little disappointed and dispirited. Sigh. That's a far cry. Yun Shirshir laughed. What are you talking about? How can you say that about your baby? The shop assistant said gloomily. It's the truth. They're both 7 years old, but my boy can't even speak clearly. It's already not easy for him to recite an ancient poem or count from 100 to 200. Last time, that little guy finally learned how to count from 1 to 100. His dad and I were so happy that we held a banquet to celebrate. My mom said that I couldn't even count to 10 when I was 7. Yun Shirshir broke out in a cold sweat. Yu could count from 1 to 100 when he just started speaking. Compared to children his age, his IQ was indeed outstanding. This showed that he was very logical. At 1.5 years old, he could already count from 1 to 100 in an orderly manner. At that time, Yun Yecheng was extremely surprised. Once he even joked that Yu was much smarter than her when she was young. Yun Shirshir felt ashamed but proud at the same time. At the mention of children, the shop assistants instantly opened their mouths and started criticizing their babies. Our child Sai. He only knows about donuts and milk tea every day. Previously, his aunt brought home a cup of milk tea by chance. He secretly tasted it and opened the door to a new world. He used to be fine drinking plain water, but now he's crying and throwing a tantrum if he doesn't touch desserts for a day. Children are usually taken care of by their parents-in-law. They dote on him and buy donuts every day for him to eat. How can a child eat these things every day? Ionli's mother and father's mother and mother's mother's mother. I'm forbidding him from eating desserts. Children can't be taught from generation to generation. Momo, you'd better spend more time on the child. Otherwise, if it goes on like this, the child will be spoiled. At that time, if you educate him, you will have no prestige at all. Chapter 24:13. I was the one who insisted on raising my little ancestor. He was especially close to me. When he was 6 years old, he knew how to fold his own blanket. I thought my child was smart and sensible, but now that I compare him, Sai. Yun Shirshir frowned helplessly. How could children be compared to each other? What parents had to do was to give their children the greatest confidence. They had to let their children know that if they did something well, they were the best. In their mother's and father's eyes, they were also the best. They should not blindly compare him with other children. Otherwise, the child's confidence would be defeated by other children. Over time, he would lose the motivation to work hard because he would subconsciously think that no matter what he did, no matter how well he did, he would not be recognized and could not be compared to other children. Someone suddenly asked, Ms. Yoon, who usually takes care of your child? Yoon Shurshur smiled and said, Before I started my career, although I was busy with work and was a company employee, I still took care of my own child. My Yu has been very independent since he was young. When he was 3 years old, he could wear his own clothes. When he was 4 years old, he stood on a small stool and cooked by himself. I don't know why, but Yu seemed to be especially smart since he was young. He was sensible and obedient and knew how to be filial to his elders, except that he was usually a little too quiet. What surprised me the most was that the food he cooked was not worse than a chef's. Even though she had already reserved some of her words, the moment she finished speaking, the huge fitting room instantly fell silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. That was too unbelievable. Cooking by himself? His culinary skills were not bad. It sounded unbelievable. Cooking by himself? When he was 4 years old? Oh my God, that's not a child prodigy. The group of people was in a mess and shook their heads. I don't believe it. My child is already 9 years old, but I still have to chase after him to feed him. He's so naughty. Yoon Shurshur said, You can't spoil him. If he doesn't want to eat, then you can eat your own food. When he's hungry, don't feel sorry for him. Get him something to eat in a hurry and tell him that if he doesn't eat at mealtime, he won't have anything to eat. Over time, he learned that if he didn't listen, he would starve. Otherwise, the child will develop the habit of thinking that you're begging him to eat. Even if he doesn't eat, he'll still have something to eat when he's hungry, so he'll become more and more willful. So that's how it is. Sigh. To be honest, I really envy you. To be able to have 2 such obedient babies, there were often some things that couldn't be envied. Did you sign him up for a lot of interest classes since he was young? Yoon Shurshur shook her head. Not really. On the contrary, I was usually very busy with work and rarely had a vacation. I worked overtime until very late, and he was alone at home. Apart from lunch and dinner when I took the time to come back to eat with him, usually I really didn't have much time to do things with him that he liked. But he seemed to have been very patient since he was young, and he has a typical Virgo character. When he does something, he must do it to the best of his ability to perfection. He could always do the things that the average child didn't have the patience to do. She vaguely remembered that when she was young, a type of architectural puzzle was very popular. Chapter 24:14. Usually, children wouldn't have the patience to piece them together. They would be interested and want to buy them back. She had also bought one when she saw her colleagues buying it for their children. In the end, within 2 days when she came home from work, she saw a tall metal tower model on the table in the living room. She had bought the model that was especially difficult to piece together. There were more than 2,000 puzzle pieces, but Yu had finished it in 2 days with his own ability. She could imagine that he had probably locked himself in his room for 2 whole days, carefully cutting and piecing the pieces together. Half a month later, her colleague complained to her that she had bought a few hundred yuan for the puzzle, but in the end, the child had lost his patience halfway through the puzzle. In the end, she and the child's father had to finish the puzzle. She wanted to cry but had no tears. She was full of complaints. When Yoon Shurshur heard this, she said proudly, You finished it in 2 days. The colleague immediately retorted, That's impossible. You must have help, right? She said innocently, I'm working overtime every day. How could I have time? I don't believe it. Yoon Shurshur took out her phone to show her colleague the photos she had taken of the final product. Only then was the colleague skeptical. She sized her up as if she were looking at a freak and asked a classic question. Shurshur, how did you give birth to this child? She had given birth to such an amazing child. Yoon Shurshur didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the question. The more patient the child is, the more intelligent he is. Yeah, our child has no patience at all. No matter what toy he plays with, it will take him 3 days. Yu didn't. The toys that she had given him were all kept in the bookcase and he would lovingly wipe them every once in a while. Even though he had moved many times, he rarely lost the toys. Before moving, he would always put the toys in a cardboard box and take them away. He was a very nostalgic person. After a long time, he might have lost interest in playing with them. However, during his lonely childhood, these toys had accompanied him. Hence, he couldn't bear to throw them away. Yoon Shurshur suddenly smiled. What could be more blissful than having your child cherish your feelings? There was a great sense of belonging. Every time she saw Yu taking good care of the toys she gave him, she would feel very happy. Whether it was a couple or a child, there was always a feeling of pleasing between them. Children also hoped to gain the approval of their parents. It was the same for parents. Several shop assistants were envious while exchanging their experiences on taking care of children. They helped Yun Shirshir put on the fishtail wedding dress. When Yun Shirshir came out of the fitting room again, everyone looked at her and couldn't help but be surprised. "Miss Yun, your baby really has a good sense of beauty. You look even more elegant and charming in this fishtail wedding gown." "You flatter me." "You're flattering me not at all." Yun Shirshir pushed the door open and walked out. When Yu heard the door open, he rushed over excitedly. His eyes were first filled with shock and amazement, then he circled around her and sized her up a few times before nodding his head in satisfaction. "Mommy, you look even better in this dress than the previous one." Muyaja and Xiaoyichen also raised their heads and looked over. The father and son's eyes flashed in unison, revealing a dazzling light. Chapter 24:15. "Wow!" Xiaoyichen exclaimed exaggeratedly. Then he clutched his chest and said in all seriousness, "Mommy, how can you be so beautiful? Daddy and I are mesmerized by you." Muyaja couldn't help but smack him on the head. "Be more reserved." Xiaoyichen said, "Daddy, you can be reserved if you want to, but I don't want to be reserved. Because I'm really beautiful." Yu snorted coldly. "Humph, you only know how to bootlick." "What?" "It's the truth. I really think that Mommy is really beautiful. Other than beauty, what else can you say that's constructive?" Yu's words were shocking. The few shop assistants at the side were in a mess again. Constructive. The child actually knew the word constructive. Xiaoyichen rubbed his chin and pondered for a moment. Then he snapped his fingers and said, "Mommy looks like a goddess in this dress." Yu snorted. "Mommy is a goddess to begin with. Like a mermaid." "Mph. Vulgar." Amused by their banter, Yun Shirshir could not help retorting, "You guys can keep feeding me with your bewitching potion." Xiaoyichen ran up to her and said pitifully, "Mommy, how can you call this bewitching? Do you want Xiaoyichen to cut out his heart for you to see before you know that Xiaoyichen is sincerely praising you?" Yun Shirshir was speechless. Yu frowned in disdain. "Eek, that's disgusting." Yun Shirshir looked at Muyaja expectantly and asked, "What about this one? What do you think?" Muyaja stared at her for a long time. He couldn't hide the amazement in his eyes. Then he said, "If you wear this on the wedding day, it'll definitely be beautiful." "What do you mean by beautiful?" "Daddy, do you know how to praise people?" Xiaoyichen paused for a moment and then said in an intoxicated manner, "Mommy will definitely amaze everyone when she wears this to the wedding. Everyone will be mesmerized." "You've finally learned a few idioms," Yu retorted expressionlessly from the side. "PFFF." Yun Shirshir smiled. Xiaoyichen's face was covered in dirt. He stomped his feet angrily and said, Yu, if you continue to be like this, I won't play with you anymore." "Ha! Now you know how to threaten people," Yu said as he clapped his hands leisurely. "Aya, I can't wait. You better not play with me. It's best if you don't stick to me." Xiaoyichen hugged Yun Shirshir's long legs, looking for warmth. "Then I'll stick to Mommy." Yu immediately walked over and tried to pry his hand away. "Go away. Don't dirty Mommy's dress. Don't stick to Mommy." "What are you doing?" "I want to stick to Mommy." "I'll beat you up. Come on. I'm not scared of you. Your arms and legs are so small. A punch from you won't hurt or itch." As he spoke, Xiaoyichen even showed off his muscles and rolled up his sleeves to show off his martial prowess. Everyone was shocked when they saw the well-defined muscles on his arms. "Oh my God! Such a small child actually has triceps muscles." They were shocked. Everyone was silently criticizing. "I really want to have a dozen cute babies like this." What was the experience like trying on more than 10 wedding dresses? Quick. Want. Take. Off. However, after trying on each dress, she was very satisfied and couldn't bear to part with any of them. Chapter 24:16. In the end, after an intense discussion, which almost got into a fight, The father-son trio decided that the deep V wedding gown and the mermaid wedding gown would be worn on the day of the wedding. As for the remaining 10 gowns, they could be used for their wedding photoshoot as a memento. Yu strongly requested for the mermaid wedding gown to be used for their photoshoot. Initially, Wuxia wanted to wear it on the day of the wedding. However, Yu strongly requested to keep such a beautiful photo of her mother in the photo album. When the time came, they could make a pendant like their uncle and embed the photo in it. Wuxia said that there would also be a professional wedding photographer on the day of the wedding to capture the entire process. Only then did Yu agree to compromise. After trying on the wedding gowns, Yun Shishir felt as if her whole body was about to fall apart. Really, very tiring. Moreover, it was already very late by the time they tried on all the wedding gowns. The 4 of them casually had dinner. During this time, they received a call from the hospital. Gong Jie called to inform them that Yun Yeqing had regained consciousness. Wuxia and Yun Shishir looked at each other before rushing to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital, the 4 of them had just entered the elevator when they bumped into the operating table that was being pushed in hurriedly. Yun Shishir took a look and was shocked to see his face, which had been burned beyond recognition. Her heart skipped a beat. Lu Jingtian. A few nurses also walked in. There were just enough people and they pressed the button for the floor where Yun Yeqing's ward was. There was silence in the air. One of the nurses suddenly sighed. It's too scary for such a good girl to be burned to such a state. The chief surgeon said that she might not have any hope of speaking in the future. But at least she made it through the critical period safely. She's lucky to be able to survive. With such a large area of her body burned, we don't know if she'll be at risk of infection later. Many of her tissues have been damaged. After she recovers, she'll have to face a long rehabilitation period. She's really pitiful. I heard that last night. The patient's mother suffered a myocardial infarction due to her mental and physical exhaustion. She was sent to the emergency room and is still in the ward now. His daughter has suffered such a calamity. He must be devastated. Perhaps, he might not be unable to speak. This was not certain. It also depended on the recovery during the infection period. The operation was a success, but his face was burned to such a state. It was too scary. Being alive is also a lifelong nightmare. Exactly. If it were me, I'd rather die like this. If I wake up and see my face burning like this, I might even go crazy. On the side, a woman who looked like the head nurse glared fiercely at the blabbermouth nurse and reprimanded. Know your place and be careful with your words. Don't say things that shouldn't be said. The nurse hummed in shame, but she thought to herself, that's the truth. Wasn't that the truth? If a woman couldn't wear a beautiful dress, couldn't put on beautiful makeup, and looked in the mirror every day, she would see a face that looked like a ghost. It was as if her face had been destroyed by lava. What was the point of living? A crippled body would destroy a person's survival instincts. He didn't know if this patient would still have the courage to live after waking up. If it were her, she would definitely seek death. Chapter 24:17. Didn't the news say that there was a suspicious person in the footage taken at the scene of the fire? They suspected him to be the arsonist. No matter what, even if he wanted to commit suicide, he wouldn't use such a cruel method. What's more, what could cause such a huge fire to spread all over his body? Didn't you read the news? There was ethanol on his clothes, and it caught fire when it came into contact with an open flame. Then, it must be a large amount of ethanol to cause such a fire. TSK. What a pitiful person. Yun Shishir stared silently at Lu Jingtian's face. If not for the latter's iconic silhouette and the fact that the hospital could not find a second patient with such a terrifying burn, she would not have recognized her. A few nurses suddenly sized them up. Realizing that there were other people present, they did not say anything else. However, such terrifying injuries caused them to feel a lingering fear. One never knows which comes first. An accident or tomorrow, said one of the nurses. The elevator door suddenly opened with a ding sound. A few nurses pushed the bed out and hurriedly pushed it to the intensive care unit. Yu and Xiaoyichen looked at each other and narrowed their eyes suspiciously. Yun Shishir and Wuxia also looked at each other. He held her hand tightly and comforted her. Don't let your imagination run wild. Okay. She nodded. It was not because she was frightened by Lu Jingtian's unsightly face. Instead, she heard the nurse's words earlier. One never knows which comes first. An accident or tomorrow. She was just thinking about it. When they rushed to the ward and pushed open the door, they startled the person on the bed. Yun Yecheng's eyes widened in shock, and his breathing quickened. When Gong Jie saw this, he immediately comforted him. Uncle Shirshir and brother-in-law are here. Yu and Shaoichen are here too. Don't be afraid. He comforted him again and again, and Yun Yecheng's emotions gradually calmed down. Ever since that incident, he felt extremely uneasy when he was half-conscious. When he was awake, be it a doctor or a nurse, anyone who pushed open the door and entered would make him subconsciously fearful. He could not close his eyes, and the cornea of his left eye was also burned, so he could not see clearly. Gong Jie comforted him and raised his head, indicating for them to be gentle. Yun Shirshir quietly walked to the bed and saw Gong Jie turn around. He picked up a cup of water, dipped a cotton swab and smeared it on the inside of his lips. She asked worriedly, "Can't Daddy drink water now?" "Yes." Gong Jie nodded. "The doctor has repeatedly reminded me not to drink plain water. After a person was burned, the sodium salt would also be lost when the body fluid leaked out. If the person was given plain water, it might cause the concentration of sodium chloride in the blood to drop further, causing the cells to be filled with water. This would lead to cerebral edema and pulmonary edema, which would lead to the so-called water poisoning. If it was not handled well, it would be life-threatening. The main way to rehydrate was to replenish blood volume through the veins to relieve thirst." Mu Yaja said, "Xiaojie, it's been hard on you." At the side, Yu and Shaoichen said in unison, gratified, "Xiaojie, it's been hard on you." The corners of Gong Jie's eyes twitched. "What did you call me?" Chapter 24:18. Yun Yecheng could vaguely hear Yun Shirshir's voice. His facial muscles twitched as he tried to open his mouth, but he could only make a few gasping sounds. Even so, it was so painful that he felt as if his throat was smoking. He frowned and tried to raise his hand, but the nerves in his hand had been burned through. It had become numb, and he could no longer make any basic movements. Yun Yecheng was in agony. Was he going to suffer like this for the rest of his life? Before this, he was woken up by the pain. Gong Jie called for the doctor, who hurried in to give him an injection of analgesia. Even so, it did not help. Although he felt better, the pain was still unimaginable to an ordinary person. Yun Shirshir noticed his subtle movements and immediately went to the bedside. She did not dare to hold his hand and only said softly, "Dad, I'm here. You can't speak now and need to rest. Don't force yourself." Yun Yecheng stared at her with great effort, but his eyes gradually moistened. The moment she saw his moist eyes, her heart instantly wrenched in pain as her heart ached for him. She quickly wiped away the traces of tears in front of her and comforted him. "Don't worry. No matter what, I'll take good care of you. You don't have to be afraid. Everything is over now." "Everything is over now?" Yun Yecheng's breathing suddenly quickened. How could everything be over now? He would always wake up to Yun Na's sinister and hysterical laughter in the middle of the night. Whenever he recalled her hate-filled eyes in his dreams, he would feel even more fearful. She didn't die. Did she come back to seek revenge? What kind of deep hatred did she have for him to be so ruthless? He was already injured. Would it be Shirshir's turn next? Or could it be Yu or Shaoichen? Yun Yecheng regretted all of a sudden. He regretted the fact that, when Yun Shirshir had asked him about it, he had indirectly induced her to engage in ordinary social violence. Back then, he was still concerned about Yun Na. He was worried that she would be caught, brought to justice and sentenced to death. However, when he woke up, he felt a lingering fear more than once. He shouldn't have hidden it for her. A mistake was a mistake, and they should be punished by the law. Even if she was his own daughter, he shouldn't have protected and indulged her. However, from that day onwards, Yun Shirshir never asked him about it again. His vocal cords were burned and he could no longer speak. Hence, this matter became a source of worry for him. He could not tolerate Yun Na continuing to make mistakes. If he hurt Shirshir, he would never be able to forgive himself. Therefore, this had aroused his desire to live. Yun Yeching was suddenly overcome with grief and could not stop his tears. She wiped them away patiently as her heart ached even more. What should we do? Daddy must be in a lot of pain. Didn't the doctor give him any sedatives? I was injected with an analgesic pump, but the doctor also said that the effect is only to relieve the pain. It only reduces the pain slightly. This? Yun Shirshir frowned worriedly. How can an ordinary person endure this kind of pain? Is there no other way? He just passed the infection stage. The analgesic pump can only be administered once a day. Yun Shirshir looked at her father, whose breathing was getting more rapid, and fell into a state of worry once more. Chapter 24:19. Gong Jie suddenly thought of something. He held Yun Shirshir's hand and walked to the balcony. There's another way. Gong Jie said. Bring uncle back to the Gong family. Yun Shirshir was startled. Back to the Gong family? Gong Jie said confidently. The Gong family has the best medical science in the world. There's no second place in the world. If we bring uncle back to the Gong family, I can guarantee that uncle will receive the best treatment. Moreover, there's a chance that he can regain his ability to speak. Yun Shirshir was a little worried. Really? Of course. Gong Jie pondered for a moment and said, previously, a person was injured by a grenade and was sent to the local hospital. The doctor said that he couldn't save his legs. If we bring him back to the Gong family's medical base, he can try to get out of bed and walk in less than a month. Half a year later, he has recovered. This is a miracle for the medical standards of the world. If we return to the Gong family, can father really recover better? Gong Jie shook his head and said, I can't be sure to what extent he can recover, but compared to the medical standards here, it will be more than twice as good. At the same time, if we return to the Gong family, we can guarantee his safety. Yun Shirshir was tempted. If it's feasible, it's best to return to the Gong family for treatment. Gong Jie said. Then I'll make the arrangements. Tomorrow, I'll send someone to send uncle back to the Gong family. So fast? With uncle's body, the faster the treatment, the more optimistic it will be for him to recover. If there's any delay, I don't have much confidence. Yun Shirshir hesitated for a long time, then slowly nodded. Gong Jie took out the satellite phone and said, Then I'll make the arrangements. Wait. Yun Shirshir suddenly held his hand tightly. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows in confusion. However, she asked hesitantly, What kind of family is the Gong family? Xiao Jie, can you tell me? Gong Jie's expression froze. He furrowed his brows, then relaxed and asked gently, Sister, do you want to know? Yun Shirshir said, Yes, of course. This is related to you, so of course I want to know. Gong Jie suddenly smiled, patted her head and comforted her. As long as you want to hear it, I will tell you. But I have to make arrangements for uncle first, and then I will tell you when I have the chance. All right. Gong Jie smiled and suddenly kissed her forehead. He pressed his forehead against hers and asked softly, Do you know about the Hurricane Group? Hurricane Group? Yes. Gong Jie said. The Hurricane Group is backed by the Gong family. Hurricane Group. Yun Shirshir and Gong Jie returned to the ward, still deep in thought. Gong Jie walked to Muyaja and told him about their earlier discussion. Muyaja asked suspiciously, Is the Gong family's medical standard really that good? Of course. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows arrogantly. The Gong's medical technology is not something the Mu group can compare to. Oh. Muyaja's face turned cold. When Yu heard that Gong Jie wanted to bring Yun Yeching back for treatment, he slapped his forehead in shock and mumbled, Why didn't I think of that? With the Gong's support, Grandpa should be able to get good treatment. Yun Shirshir looked at him in surprise. You know about the Gongs? Yuntenyu bit his lower lip. Oh no, he seemed to have let it slip. Chapter 24:20. The corners of Yu's lips twitched as he broke out in a cold sweat. He then turned his face away and pretended to be dead. Gong Jie could not help but burst into laughter. This little lad is so adorable. He could not help but reach out to pinch his little cheeks. You seem very suspicious. Yu slapped his hand away and stuck out his tongue at him. Yun Shirshir interrogated. Tell me honestly. What are you two hiding from me? Yu's expression turned awkward for a moment before he coaxed. Mommy, I'll tell you when we get home. He was determined to stall for time with her. Yun Shirshir agreed on the surface, but deep down, she was certain that she would not let this guy get away with it again. After settling Yun Yeqing down, Gong Jia said to Yun Shirshir, I'll make arrangements tonight to bring uncle back to the Gong family for treatment tomorrow. Okay. Yun Shirshir nodded and walked to the bedside. She whispered to her father, Dad, don't worry. You'll definitely get better. Yun Yeqing stared at her. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as if he wanted to say something. Yun Shirshir immediately stopped him. Your throat is burned. Don't try to speak, okay? Rest well and get better soon. I'm still waiting for you to attend my wedding. Yun Yeqing's gaze softened, and only then did his expression soften. He gently closed his eyes, taking in her words. On the way home, Yun Shirshir suddenly looked forward to Muyaja and asked curiously, Do you have any plans for the wedding? I'm planning to hold it in October. I don't know if Dad will be better by then. Yun Shirshir pondered for a moment before she suddenly took a deep breath and shook her head. Still not possible. Let's postpone the wedding for the time being, okay? Yu and Xiaoyichen looked at each other in surprise. Why? Dad hasn't recovered yet. Seeing him in so much pain today, I'm full of guilt. I'm afraid I can't convince myself to happily wear a wedding dress for the wedding. Makes me feel so guilty. She furrowed her brows, looking worried. When she was trying on the wedding dress today, she was immersed in happiness. She was pleasantly surprised and looked forward to the wedding. However, the moment she stepped into the hospital and saw Yun Yeqing in pain, her happiness dissipated in an instant. Probably no one could ignore the pain of their loved ones and force a smile to welcome happiness. Yun Shirshir said tentatively, When Dad gets better, we'll hold the wedding. We can take the wedding photos first. When everything is ready, we can hold it happily when the whole family is reunited. This way we won't have any regrets. She originally thought that she would see disappointment on his face, but Muyaja did not feel disappointed. Instead, he smiled guiltily. I'm sorry, I didn't think it through. He had not thought of this at first. When it came to kinship, he was really weak. Other than his mother and Xiaoyichen, he rarely felt the warmth of kinship when he was young. However, when she came, he suddenly realized that Yun Yeqing's serious injury was probably a sore point for her. If he could not recover, he would not be able to welcome the wedding with a happy heart. He was a perfectionist. Naturally, he did not want to have any regrets during their wedding. Muyaja said, It won't be too late to hold the wedding when Dad gets better. Chapter 24-21. Yun Shirshir smiled in relief. After returning home, Yu went to the bathroom. After washing up, he wanted to sneak into the bedroom. Yun Shirshir was quick to catch him. She carried him into the living room and placed him on the sofa. Yu was trembling in fear. Yun Shirshir looked at him and narrowed her eyes. She suddenly smiled and said in an extremely gentle voice, Yu, why are you so self-conscious today? Don't you want Daddy to read you bedtime stories? Yu scratched his head and said, Mommy, you don't know. When Daddy reads bedtime stories, his face is stern and his voice is eerie. It would be strange if I didn't have nightmares. Muyaja, who was sitting at the side, glared at him. Nightmares? Yu imitated his expression and said, Once upon a time, there was a beautiful castle in the Elan kingdom. In the castle lived the king, the queen, and the adorable princess. His eerie tone was extremely frightening. Yu imitated Muyaja's tone and said, It would be strange if I didn't have nightmares. Yun Shirshir flicked his forehead. Don't change the subject. Okay. Yu pouted softly. Let me ask you, do you know about the Gong family? Yu looked at him and said, He thought to himself, what did Uncle say to Mommy? Did he tell her about the Gong family's background? Or did he tell her about the things he had done? Oh my God. He was now a good citizen. Other than occasionally causing trouble at the Pentagon and being in charge of the basic development of the Hurricane Group's Heavenly Eye project, he didn't do anything bad. He probed. Did Uncle say something to you? Yun Shirshir narrowed her eyes and looked at him suspiciously. She nodded. He said a lot. For example? Yu asked anxiously. What did he say? At this moment, the mother and son were having a mental battle. Yun Shirshir glared at him. Don't play any tricks with me. I'll be strict if you confess, and lenient if you resist. Ah, Yu said with lingering fear. If I confess, I'll be punished severely. If I resist, I'd better not confess. FFF. Muyaja almost choked on his tea. Shaoichen laughed so hard that tears almost came out of his eyes. In a moment of desperation, he had actually reversed his words. Yun Shirshir blushed and said, "Mommy, it was a slip of the tongue. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll spank you." "All right. I'll talk. I'll confess." Yu raised his hands in surrender. He took a sip of the warm milk and asked, "Mommy, do you know anything about the Hurricane Group?" "I don't know much about it." Yu observed her expression and said carefully, "The truth is, the Gong family's background is not simple. They have a powerful background. The Hurricane Group is prominent internationally, especially in the political arena. It's essentially an international arms organization controlled by the Gong family." "Arms?" Yun Shirshir nearly bit her tongue as a look of surprise surfaced on her face. "Military munitions. Was that terrorists?" Chapter 24-22. It can be said that the Hurricane Group occupies a large portion of the global arms market. It is the leader of the arms market. On average, 7 out of 10 people in the world use weapons made by the Hurricane Group. As for Uncle, he holds an important position in the Hurricane Group. He can be said to be a core member of the group and is highly valued by the family. He is mainly in charge of the North American market and is the main person in charge of the North American arms market. He is also the chief commander of the Hurricane Group and is in charge of large orders for important organizations in various countries. Yun Shirshir was flabbergasted. "Isn't that illegal?" "It is illegal in the country, but not completely." "Mommy, you seem to have misunderstood." Yu continued. "Unlike the arms sold on the black market, the Hurricane Group mainly deals with international markets. Among them, Africa is the most important market for the Hurricane Group. Most of the weapons made by the military factory are sold to the war-torn areas in Africa. In addition, they also deal with other countries. Those international arms dealers were nothing in his eyes. The Hurricane Group's biggest competitor is the United Five Countries. The world's top arms dealers apart from ZM, EF and Y are controlled by the Hurricane Group." Yun Shirshir was completely dumbfounded and shocked. The United Five Countries had their own military factories. At the same time, they would also sell large quantities of weapons to other countries around the world. The Hurricane Group's main competitors were these 5 countries. Naturally, they were also listed as enemies by these countries. Therefore, the Hurricane Group's enemies were the American FBI. Speaking of which, Gong Jia was one of the top figures on the FBI's wanted list. When the interests of their country were infringed, some big shots would naturally not sit back and do nothing. Therefore, the North American shipping route was blocked by the M government. His job was to smoothly clear the route and avoid these cumbersome international agents to transport to the war zone. "Are you kidding me?" Yun Shirshir was in disbelief. In her impression, military fire had always been an unconventional field. Unconventional? That was illegal. "Mommy, every word I said is true." Yu suddenly said. "Do you still remember when Uncle appeared on the day of your engagement?" "Yes. That freighter of his was no ordinary freighter. Instead, it was a freighter filled with military supplies. In other words, the things on that freighter completely destroyed that island." Yun Shirshir jumped in shock and was tongue-tied. Yu coughed awkwardly and probed. "Mommy, did I scare you?" Yun Shirshir stared at him for a while and nodded. "A little. Then do you want me to continue?" "Yes." Yun Shirshir hurriedly asked. "Is it dangerous to do this?" This question stumped Yu. Danger? How could it not be dangerous? As long as one was in this area, danger lurked everywhere at all times. There was once when Gong Jia was transporting a batch of goods to North America via shipping route. However, he was blocked by the FBI's International Anti-Terrorism Team, and the two parties got into a fierce fight. Fortunately, Gong Jia escaped unscathed. If he had lost and been arrested, he would have been sent to the Nuremberg military court for an international trial. Chapter 24-23. Another time there was a rebellion in an African country. Gong Jia was escorting a batch of goods to the destination when they were surrounded by the rebels. In the fierce battle, both sides suffered heavy losses. Among them, Gong Jie's most valued deputy was kidnapped by the rebels and beheaded in the end. Gong Jie was furious. Although he eventually destroyed the rebels' lair, he paid a hefty price for it. What was even more regrettable was that the deputy was outstanding. Losing one of Gong Jie's favorite men became his heartache. Was it dangerous? Of course it was dangerous. Every step was treacherous. Mommy knew that Gong Jie often stayed at the hospital to take care of Yun Yecheng. What she did not know was that, in order to ensure Gong Jie's safety, Hurricane had dispatched more than a dozen mercenaries to guard every corner of the hospital. However, if one wanted to become powerful, one had to pay a price. Gong Jie had once confessed that when he first took on this job, he thought that it was an outrageous thing to do. Bringing war and rebellion to those countries, as well as the helpless faces of the refugees who had been harmed by the war, had given him nightmares. It was only later when he witnessed the tragic death of a refugee child in the midst of gunfire that he suddenly woke up. Life was so fragile. The life of the weak was in the hands of the strong. He did not want to be the weak. He wanted to be the strong one who could control his own destiny. That was until Yu proposed to perfect the Deva Eye project. Gong Jie did not agree at first, but Yu's philosophy was that, although the sea was big, it was not endless. Until now, what mankind had not conquered was the sky. The sky was the main way to start a war. Whether it was nuclear bombs or missiles, if one could control the sky and forcibly monopolize the air routes, one could control the war situation to a certain extent. Not only that, it would also bring about considerable benefits for Hurricane Group. The Deva Eye project was still in its implementation stage. Hurricane Group's current technical resources were far from enough. They were constantly recruiting talents from various fields to form a core research and development team, before proceeding to the next stage of research and development. From this, it could be seen that Hurricane Group's ambition did not stop here. They wanted to become the dictator of war. However, Yu would never tell her this. Perhaps even if he explained, Yun Shishir might not be able to understand the reason behind it. Xiao Jie never mentioned it to me. Yun Shishir frowned and suddenly looked at Muyaja. Do you know about the Hurricane Group? Yes. Muyaja did not avoid the topic. The Gong family's power is unimaginable to ordinary people. It can be said that even the current Mu family is just an ordinary family in front of him. When Yun Shishir heard this, her expression became even more exaggerated. No wonder little Jie is always so busy. Yu nodded. Of course. When uncle is busy, he doesn't even know where he is when he wakes up. Yun Shishir was speechless. He never told me. Maybe he didn't want mommy to worry? Also, he was worried that mommy would be afraid. She was afraid that he was a cruel person. After all, he came from this field and was listed as a dangerous person internationally. Uncle was worried that mommy would be afraid that he was a scary person if she knew his identity. However, another reason is that the fewer people who know about uncle's identity, the better. Chapter 24-24. No matter what he does, I won't be afraid of him. He's my family. After a pause, she suddenly felt a little worried. I'm just worried about him. Yu's eyelids twitched. Seeing Yun Shishir's worried expression, he hurriedly comforted her. Mommy, don't worry. Uncle has a lot of mercenaries protecting him. Those mercenaries are all top experts in the mercenary world. Hurricane is in charge of the world's top mercenary organization, Mercenary Paradise. Mercenary Paradise is the leader among mercenary organizations. Even the FBI can't do anything about it. Is he that good? Yu said. Yeah. He can deal with two dads at once. Muyaja's eyes twitched when he said that. He couldn't help but glare at him. Yu said innocently, it's the truth. Muyaja was speechless. Xiaoichen patted Muyaja's shoulder sympathetically and said pitifully, Daddy, you don't seem to be very authoritative. Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something. Her gaze fell on Yu. How do you know so much? Yu scratched his head and explained dryly, because Uncle mentioned it to me before. He told you but not me? You'll be confused if you're too concerned. Uncle didn't tell you because he was afraid that you'd worry too much. Yun Shishir's gaze was a little lonely. If he didn't tell me, wouldn't I be more worried? Mommy, don't you feel afraid or repulsed? Huh? Yu said. It's such a dangerous job. Mommy, aren't you afraid that Uncle is a bad person? Yoon Shirshir said honestly, there's no boundary between good and bad people. In other words, America is a righteous country in the world and acts as the world's police. However, to some countries that have been deprived of their resources, they're like demons. There's no such thing as absolute justice. People only look at their own interests. Wow! Yu exclaimed in an exaggerated manner. Mommy, I can't believe you have such awareness. Yoon Shirshir's face darkened. Yu, what do you mean by that? Nothing. Yu smiled gracefully. As long as Mommy doesn't let her imagination run wild. Yu returned to her room and closed the door. She heaved a long sigh of relief. Tuck tuck tuck. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Startled, he thought that it was Yoon Shirshir and immediately asked, Mommy. It's me. Xiaoichen's pitiful voice came from outside the door. You locked me out of the room. Okay? Yu hurriedly opened the door to let Xiaoichen in and closed the door behind him. Xiaoichen turned on the lights in the bedroom. Seeing Yu's stiff expression, he immediately said, Don't worry, Mommy didn't ask anything. That's good. Xiaoichen patted his chest exaggeratedly and said, Huff huff. You scared me just now. I thought that your real background was going to be exposed. Yu's lips twitched and he said, If Mommy knew that I was the core of the hurricane group, she would definitely jump in fright. Xiaoichen said, It's still optimistic that she would jump in fright. She might even get a heart attack. Yu's mind was in a mess. He felt that Mommy was like a little white rabbit. His uncle, daddy, him and even grandpa who was far away surrounded her. Which one of them wasn't at the level of a big bad wolf? It seemed like Mommy was completely surrounded by a pack of big bad wolves. Chapter 24-25. Xiaoichen stretched out on the bed and looked at the ceiling. Actually, I don't think Mommy needs to know so much. She just needs to know that whether it's Uncle, Daddy, Yu or Xiaoichen, they're all very reliable people. Yu lay on the bed as well. The two little lads stretched out in unison and looked at the ceiling silently. Mommy is so stupid, so we should protect her more carefully. Upon hearing this, Xiaoichen turned to look at Yu and smiled knowingly. He suddenly said, If possible, build a castle and protect Mommy in it. No one is allowed to bully her. There's no need to build a castle. Yu paused for a moment before saying heroically, We're Mommy's castle. Humph. You can build a castle. I want to be Mommy's guardian knight. No matter where Mommy goes, I'll protect her. Yu muttered unhappily in his heart, what a spoilsport. Yoon Shirshir did not sleep well the entire night as her thoughts ran wild. She was thinking about Gong Jia, and how much Yoon Yecheng would recover after returning to the Gong family. Could he still speak? Many of his vital nerves had been damaged. She could only pray that he wouldn't suffer too much. The next day, by the time Yoon Shirshir and Muyaja rushed to the hospital, Gong Jia had already sent a car to the hospital. When they saw him, he was already wearing a military trench coat. It was still the same snow-white trench coat and white military boots. At a glance, he looked tall and slender, and his skin was even fairer. However, what was slightly different was that there was a hint of black at the base of his hair. Gong Jia walked over with a smile and hugged her tightly when he saw her. Sis, my vacation is over. After his vacation, he arranged for Yoon Yecheng to stay at the Gong family's medical center before flying to North America to start a series of work. Yoon Shirshir hugged him reluctantly. She was really happy to have him by her side this new year. Now that they were separated, she did not know when they would meet again. Yoon Yecheng was carried into the car. The private jet arrived at Mersline Private Airport. Yoon Shirshir and Muyaja boarded the car together to send Yoon Yecheng and Gong Jia to the airport. By the time they reached the airport, the medical team had been waiting for a long time. Before Yoon Yecheng was sent to the plane, Yoon Shirshir, holding back her tears as she knelt beside the bed and encouraged him, Dad, I'll wait for you to come back. Yoon Yecheng looked at her with the same reluctance to part. He was heartbroken that he could not open his mouth to say goodbye to her. He was worried. Even if she could move her hands, she would still be able to write down his instructions on a piece of paper for him to see. The problem was that she was now a cripple. She couldn't do anything but look at him with tears in her eyes. Don't worry. Xiao Jia will definitely have a way to cure you, Yoon Shirshir said as she looked deeply into his eyes. I'll wait for you to come back. Tears rolled down Yoon Yecheng's cheeks. Yun Shirsha retreated to her original spot and was quickly pushed into the car by the medical staff. Gong Jie boarded the plane, but he suddenly stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at her. The wind at the airport was very strong, and it messed up his sideburns. He suddenly walked up to Yun Shirsha and pulled her into his arms. He hugged her tightly with a frown, reluctant to part with her. Sis, take care. Chapter 24-26. Gong Jie smiled and rubbed her head affectionately. When he looked up at Muyaja, his face turned cold as he warned him expressionlessly, "If you dare to bully her when I'm not around, I'll teach you a lesson." Muyaja snorted and ignored him. The two of them were still in an abyss of suffering even when they parted. Gong Jie then said to Yun Shirsha, "If brother-in-law bullies you, tell me. I'll come back immediately." He gave her a business card with his satellite phone number on it. Yun Shirsha kept the card and smiled. "Your brother-in-law won't bully me. You, on the other hand, must take care of yourself." You said that his job was dangerous. She had no other concerns except for him to protect himself. Gong Jie promised, "I will." With that, he let go of her and turned to board the plane without looking back. The cabin door slowly closed. Yun Shirsha and Muyaja returned to the hospital. Yun Yeching had been transferred to the Gong family's medical base. As they were in a hurry, they did not have time to tidy up the ward and pay for the remaining expenses. However, when she returned to the ward to pack her clothes, she discovered that Yun Yeho and Xiang Yu had arrived at the hospital at some point and were waiting for her in the ward. They were originally here to visit her, but the nurse told them that Yun Yeching had been transferred away. They were at a loss. Hence, when Yun Shirsha returned to the hospital, Yun Yeho anxiously went up to her and asked, "Where's your father?" "Uncle, why are you here?" "I'm here to see if he's feeling better," Yun Shirsha replied. "He's still the same, but he's been transferred to another medical base for treatment." Yun Yeho was at a loss. "This burn hospital is the best in the capital for treating burns. Where did you transfer your father to?" "I just sent him on a plane. I'm planning to send him to a medical base overseas to see if there's a miracle." Yun Shirsha only told him this much and did not say much else. Yun Yeho did not pursue the matter further, and only expressed his concern before ordering his wife to tidy up the ward. Actually, there wasn't much to pack. Other than a few things, the rest was the script that she had read during the night watch. After packing up their things, Yun Shirsha and Muyaja were about to leave. When they passed by a ward, the door suddenly opened. A middle-aged woman suddenly rushed out of the ward, heartbroken. As she walked out of the ward, she covered her face. Tears flowed non-stop as she let out a sorrowful cry. Startled, Yun Shirsha dodged and looked through the window of the ward, only to see that it was Lu Jingtian's ward. How could I forget? Lu Jingtian also lived on this floor. This floor was full of intensive care units. They were all patients with severe burns and needed to be observed. Another middle-aged man walked out of the ward. He looked a little upset. His face was red, and his eyes were red and swollen. There were thick bags under his eyes. It was obvious that he had not rested well. Don't cry so easily in front of the child. If the child saw this, he would feel even more despair. Do you still expect Tian Tian to get better? Get better? The middle-aged woman cried and retorted. How else can she get better? She's injured to this extent. Who the hell is it? Who the hell is so cruel? It was obvious that this woman was well educated, but when she mentioned the culprit, she was so agitated that she even used vulgar words like ***. Chapter 24-27. Who knows? The man grumbled in annoyance. At the mention of the murderer, he gritted his teeth as well. His eyes were bloodshot and filled with murderous intent. If we find this kind of anti-society criminal, we should drag him out and shoot him. He'll definitely be a scourge if we keep him alive. The woman cried. Tian Tian woke up last night. She couldn't speak, but her eyes were empty as if there was no life in them. She should know that her looks are all ruined. She loves to dress up and look beautiful. If she sees herself in this state in the future, she won't be able to live on. What should we do then? The man was also worried for a moment. He subconsciously took out his cigarette box and wanted to light a cigarette, but when he remembered that they were in the hospital, he stuffed the cigarette back into the box. The woman continued to cry bitterly. The doctor said that it's a miracle for her to be able to speak. My heart almost died when I heard that. It's a miracle for her to be able to speak. How painful will she be for the rest of her life then? The man replied gloomily. The police came 3 times yesterday to ask the doctor if she could speak. After all, the police suspect that this is a murder case, but there's no one else at the scene except her. They didn't collect any useful evidence at the scene, not even a fingerprint. The CCTV couldn't get a clear picture either. If she can't speak, this case can only be put on hold for the time being. The woman gritted her teeth in hatred when she heard that. Who exactly is it? Yoon Shirshir walked over and looked into the ward through the window. She saw a person lying quietly on the bed. If not for the slight rise and fall of her chest, she would not even be able to tell that it was a human figure. This was the first time she saw the tragic state of Lu Jingtian after she was injured. Her entire body was charred black, and there was no unscathed skin. Her facial features were indistinguishable as she was smeared with white ointment. She could only vaguely see a pair of empty eyes staring fixedly at the ceiling. Her eyelids were also burned and could not be closed, just like Yoon Yeching's. However, in comparison, the surface area of his injuries was slightly better than hers. Lu Jingtian's life was probably ruined after suffering such a calamity. Yoon Shirshir looked at her. She did not sympathize with her, but she felt uncomfortable. With such injuries, if she did not have the support of her family, she would not have the will to live. Mu Yaja walked over and attracted attention. Mr. Lu Jingtian's father looked up and was stunned when he saw him. Chairman Mu. He was a senior executive of Huanyu, so he was naturally no stranger to him. Mu Yaja looked at his father. Papa Lu immediately replied in trepidation. The situation isn't very optimistic. The doctor said that the burn area is very large. Even though we managed to save her life, she's still under observation. We'll have to observe her in the future. When Mama Lu saw him, she cautiously whispered into his ear. This is calm. Mrs. Lu was shocked. She immediately squeezed out a smile. Chairman Mu. Oh. Mu Yaja paused for a moment before asking. Is there any progress in the case? At the mention of this, the 2 men's faces darkened as they shook their heads. No. Chapter 24-28. Lu Bushing sighed in disappointment. I don't know if the murderer will be brought to justice in the end. His methods are too cruel. A girl as beautiful as a flower and as exquisite as jade had been ruined to such an extent. I wish I could kill the murderer with my own hands. But the case hasn't made any progress. The doctor said that he doesn't know if there's any hope for her to talk. We can only pray that Tian can talk. At least, she can provide the police with some useful clues. Didn't they collect any valid evidence at the scene? Yoon Shirshir suddenly asked anxiously. Lu Bushing shook his head, also at a loss. Mama Lu sighed and said, if we had even the slightest clue, we wouldn't be so worried. It's been a long time since the incident happened. All the pressure that should be exerted has been exerted, and the police chief has been contacted. What's next? The chief is also very surprised. Yoon Shirshir frowned thoughtfully. Logically speaking, with such advanced investigative methods, it's impossible that they can't find any clues by now. The police said that they've checked all the surveillance cameras in that area, and they didn't find any suspicious people at that stage. How can that be? There were surveillance cameras everywhere on the streets like countless eyes in the sky. How could they not find any suspicious footage? Just as Yoon Shirshir said suspiciously, Lu Bushing continued. The police suspect that the moment she left the bar, she got into the car directly, and then they couldn't capture her. However, the police investigated the bar entrance for 2 days and didn't find any witnesses. They said that they saw her enter and leave the bar wearing black clothes. Yoon Shirshir suddenly thought of an extremely important question. She looked up and suddenly asked, what about fingerprints? Fingerprints. As soon as Lu Bushing heard this, his face strangely turned green, and a lingering fear appeared in his heart. Mu Yaja also noticed his strange expression and said casually, what do you know? Tell us. Lu Bushing said hesitantly, when you mentioned fingerprints, it reminded me of what the police said earlier. Actually, to tell you the truth, we also asked this question at the beginning. But the police told us at the beginning that they couldn't collect any fingerprints at the scene. When I heard that, I also found it unbelievable. Couldn't collect any fingerprints. How could this be? She had some understanding of criminal investigation, which was why she liked to read before. She had read a lot of detective novels and even autobiographies of forensic workers. They all said with certainty, if it exists, it will leave traces. Traces could speak, they couldn't lie. It was the most irrefutable evidence. As long as a person had been at the scene of the crime, they would definitely be able to find even the slightest trace at the scene. But he actually said that he didn't collect any questions? This was somewhat inconceivable. Yoon Shurshur asked unwillingly, "Where are the footprints?" Muyaja glanced at her and found that she was very keen on getting to the bottom of this matter. Could it be that she was also suspecting that Lu Jingtian's case was somehow related to Yoon Yecheng? The two cases didn't seem to be related at all, and the methods used were different but the details were the same. Chapter 24-29. Yoon Shurshur refuted this statement. As long as we investigate further, we should be able to find some clues, right? Other than Lu Jingtian and the criminal, there shouldn't be anyone else on the second floor. Lu Bushing and Yoon Shurshur looked at each other, hesitating to speak. Muyaja said, "The second floor of the bar isn't always empty. It's just that there are fewer people at that time." Lu Bushing nodded in agreement. It's just that there are fewer people at that time. By the time Tian Tian reached the bar, the midnight show had already started, and the customers were already on the dance floor. Before this, the bar was filled with folk singers, but at this time there was no one on the dance floor. Other than a few customers who took the initiative to occupy seats, the rest went upstairs. There were many customers upstairs who were drinking and listening to songs. However, the waitress went upstairs once. She served a cup of herbal tea to that person, and she saw that person, who was dressed in black, pick up the cup and drink it directly. Yoon Shurshur furrowed her brows and walked to the side. After mulling it over, she turned around and said firmly, "If that's the case, logically speaking, her fingerprints should be left on the cup. Glass is a very good fingerprint detector, so there should be more than one fingerprint left on the cup." Lu Bushing was a little desperate. He closed his eyes and muttered, "It's precisely because they didn't find it that I find it inconceivable. Has it been wiped off?" Yoon Shurshur said, "I've seen one before, but I don't know if it's true or not. I heard that hydrochloric acid can wipe off fingerprints." Lu Bushing's mother was shocked when she heard this. However, she heard Lu Bushing say, "The police only said that as long as she touched the cup, even if she wiped it with hydrochloric acid, through technical means, even if it's incomplete fingerprints, it can be considered a basic clue. Criminal investigation technology is very advanced now. Unlike in the past, there are very few pending cases that are put on hold, and they are basically solved in a few days. Even if the murderer can escape from the lie detector machine, she can't escape the evidence left behind at the scene. Moreover, if she wiped the cup with hydrochloric acid, it proves that the cup has been wiped. However, the police technicians extracted many fingerprints from the surface of the cup, but only her fingerprints." Yoon Shurshur was stunned. Only hers was not extracted. "Yes," Yoon Shurshur said in surprise. "How is that possible? Didn't that waiter see her drink it with his own eyes? If that's the case, even if we can't find fingerprints, we should be able to find residual saliva, right? That's basically impossible. Even the provincial forensic identification agencies did not have this kind of ability. DNA testing requires a certain amount of DNA. If it's too little, it won't be able to do it." Yoon Shurshur was stunned. This is unbelievable. Muyaja suddenly thought of something. There's only one possibility if we can't get fingerprints. Yoon Shurshur's eyes widened. What do you mean? Destroy the fingerprints. Destroy fingerprints. Yoon Shurshur suddenly smiled and said, "If it's cut with a knife, the fingerprints won't be completely destroyed." Muyaja suddenly interrupted her and said casually, "It would be different if the pulp of the finger was cut off." Yoon Shurshur was dumbfounded. "Cut? Do you mean cut with a knife?" "Cut off a piece of flesh from the finger while it was still alive." Chapter 24-30. Muyaja rubbed his chin. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "Oh, of course, if something like an iron was used to burn the fingerprints, it could also completely destroy the fingerprints. Of course she would have to suffer a certain amount. Lu Buxiong and Mrs. Lu looked at each other and gasped. Would anyone be so cruel to themselves? Yun Shishir also said in disbelief. What kind of pain would she have to endure? It would be difficult to burn all 10 of her fingers with just an iron, right? Unless it was a pair of fire tongs. Would anyone be so scary? How could she be so cruel to herself? If that's the case, as long as we tell the police will keep a close eye on this clue. It shouldn't be difficult to find someone with scalded hands, right? As long as a warrant is issued, as long as the culprit is still in human society, she will definitely be brought to justice. Unless she doesn't have to go out and doesn't see the light of day all day. In the basement of the villa estate, Yun Na sat upright on the sofa and quietly read a book. Ever since that incident, her personality had become much quieter. Using the word quiet to describe her was unrealistic. Dead silence. She was like a walking corpse. There was no longer a trace of life that a person should have. There was only a lifeless silence. She didn't like to talk or smile. She continued to live for the sake of revenge. That was the value of her existence now. That woman asked her if she was afraid. How could she be afraid? Since she had already died once and even gone through hell, there was nothing scarier in this world than experiencing death. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. She quietly put the book aside, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. There was a familiar person standing outside the door, holding something in his hand. She opened the door, and the man immediately handed the things on the tray to her. This is what Missy ordered me to bring to you. Other than some necessities, there were some food, drinks, and toiletries on the tray. She took all of them and closed the door. She didn't go out and usually lived alone in the basement. She would send people to deliver the things she needed. The only good thing about the basement was that it actually had a fireplace. She walked to the fireplace and threw a bag of rubbish into it. She fiddled with it and silently watched it burn in the fire. She was dressed in black, which was what she wore at the bar. At this moment, it had already turned into ashes in the fire. She returned to the sofa and sat down. She quietly unwrapped the bread and ate it bit by bit as she read quietly. The fingers that were holding the book were a shocking sight. It was obvious that it had been burned off by something hot. Sulfuric acid? Fire tongs? An iron? None of them. She had used a windproof flintlock to burn it. The feeling of pain was self-evident. Yun Na suddenly closed her book and slowly raised her eyes. Her eyes were very big and very black. Looking at it now, they seemed extremely empty, like the deep and terrifying eye sockets of a skeleton. It made one shudder with a single glance. In the hospital, Yun Shishir asked suspiciously, how did the murderer know that Lu Jingtian would appear at the crime scene at the perfect time? Chapter 2431. Auntie Lu explained. The police initially suspected that the murderer was someone she knew, so they focused on the two best friends who met Jingtian at the bar for a drink. However, after repeated comparisons with the surveillance footage, they realized that Lu Jingtian and the murderer weren't close. In fact, they were strangers. If the murderer was a stranger, it would be a little tricky. Yun Shishir questioned. Still, if the murderer was a stranger, why did he choose Jing? Auntie Lu was shocked. Could it be an antisocial personality disorder? How can there be so many antisocial personality disorders? Yun Shishir said. Their existence is reasonable. I believe that this is a murder case and not a simple accident or assault. Or maybe the murderer didn't want to kill her on purpose, but wanted to inflict pain on her. Upon hearing Yun Shishir's analysis, Auntie Lu sucked in a breath of cold air. She covered her mouth and widened her eyes in horror as she shook her head in disbelief. How can there be such a cruel person in this world? How can he do such a heinous thing without batting an eyelid? Yun Shishir furrowed her brows but did not say anything else. Now that things had progressed to this point, she already had a vague suspect in mind. It was Yun Na. If the murderer was determined to inflict pain on Lu Jingtian, then there must be a deep and insurmountable grudge between the two. Lu Jingtian and Yun Yeqing got into trouble one after another, so they could not help but suspect her. The reason why they suspected her was because the series of events were too coincidental. The police did not suspect Yun Na because first, she was listed as a missing person. Second, they did not know the reason behind it. If they knew that Yun Na and Lu Jingtian had such a grudge, They would definitely suspect her too. Yoon Shirshir was silent for a long time before she suddenly asked, "Can I go in and see her?" Auntie Lu bit her lower lip and nodded. Of course. She just woke up though, and her emotions are still unstable. Don't disturb her. She's especially easily frightened now. I'm worried that she'll lose control of her emotions. Yoon Shirshir pushed open the door to the ward and slowly walked in. Lu Jingtian was lying quietly on the bed. She was unable to close her eyes and was forced to keep them open, which made her look particularly hideous. Her entire body was covered in burns. Even Yoon Shirshir couldn't bear to take a closer look. Life is very fragile. Man's only weapon was his superior intellect. However, the skin on his body was incomparably fragile. Yoon Shirshir looked at her quietly for a long time without saying anything. Lu Jingtian had many conflicts with her too. Previously, the police had also called her for a routine interrogation. After she provided an alibi, she was probably completely removed from the list of suspects, so they didn't call again. Given her personality, she must have offended quite a number of people. However, she did not feel much sympathy. At most, she could only say that she felt pity. All evil had a source. Unless there was an unexpected disaster, all hatred had a source and could be traced. If Lu Jingtian had not been so ruthless to Yoon Na back then, not even hesitating to use an eyebrow shaver to disfigure her face, Yoon Na would not hate her to the core. Chapter 2432. Yoon Na's face was disfigured by her. Back then in the corridor, it was Lu Jingtian who used an eyebrow shaver to cut her face, one by one, and forcibly disfigured her. As for the cycle of reincarnation, she merely sowed an evil seed and received an evil retribution. However, the price she had to pay was too heavy. Then when will it be my turn next? Yoon Na must hate me, right? She'll come looking for me sooner or later. That was what Yoon Shirshir thought in her heart. After alighting from the plane, Gong Jia escorted Yoon Yeching to the headquarters of the Hurricane Group's medical base. The medical base had a group of the world's top medical technology teachers. Rather than saying that they were the top, it was more accurate to say that they were the top to the extreme, becoming a terrifying force. The Gong family's medical base was a place that many scientists dreamed of. After alighting from the plane, Gong Jia contacted them. When he arrived at the base, a group of doctors in white coats stood at the entrance to welcome his arrival. These doctors had different skin colors and ages, and there was no lack of young women among them. Most of them were technicians from different countries and fields. Many of them were hired by Gong Xiaoying at a huge cost. Upon seeing Gong Jia, a young woman took the lead to welcome him with a smile. Welcome back. She had fair skin and beautiful facial features. She looked like a mixed blood of Chinese and European descent. Her beautiful appearance made her look especially young. When Gong Jia saw her, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Alice, long time no see. He had a close relationship with Alice. When they were free and both were at the headquarters, they would ask each other out for a drink. In fact, he was not good at interacting with women. He was close to Alice because she had a more masculine personality, and did not have the coy and pretentious characteristic of women. Secondly, he still remembered the time when he was in Africa and was accidentally injured in the war. A bullet pierced through his arm. As the battlefield was heavily polluted and the conditions were poor, the wound quickly became infected and deteriorated. The team doctor accompanying him shook his head and sighed, saying that his arm could not be saved. When they contacted the headquarters, Alice heard the news and immediately said that no matter what, they had to send the patient back to the headquarters first. They could not operate on him without permission. After he was sent back, Alice healed his arm effortlessly. Furthermore, she used genetic regeneration technology to heal his arm. Even now, there wasn't a single scar on his arm. Gong Jia saw this operation as a life-saving operation. Alice saw it as a game. She thought that Gong Jia's surgery was a little spice for her boring working life. It was a little challenging. She casually described the operation as a game to adjust her work life. In short, she was a very scary woman. It was said that with the technology she mastered, she could directly clone an ancient creature. Ancient creatures clone regeneration. This was a matter of science fiction. This was an advanced technology that scientists all over the world could only dream of. If it weren't for the fact that Alice didn't know what would happen after cloning, she might have tried to study it. He couldn't help but think of a movie, The opposite sex. What a terrifying woman. Gong Jia once again came to a conclusion. Gong Jia had always joked about whether she could use her technology to clone him a few years later. Chapter 2433. Alice said nonchalantly, for example, if you suffer a serious injury or if the cancer cells have spread throughout your body, I can separate your head from your body and reattach it to a suitable body. Gong Jia clutched his throat and shuddered when he heard that. Forget it. Alice was the youngest member of this team. She came forward and gently hugged Gong Jia before asking, Second Master, I heard that you have a patient you want to entrust to me? Gong Jia nodded. Yun Yeqing was sent to the observation room. He was still in a semi-conscious state after being injected with a tranquilizer on the plane. Alice walked around him. Suddenly, she lifted the white bedsheet covering him and lifted his clothes to check his injuries. She then put on a pair of sterile gloves, reached out and unbuttoned his clothes. She then looked at his injuries seriously. Oh, it's concentrated sulfuric acid. Yes. His upper body is badly burned, Gong Jia explained. Because he was splashed with concentrated sulfuric acid, it can be said that his entire body is covered in bruises. Alice said lightly. At least his face is completely ruined. Is there any hope? Gong Jia was a little nervous. Alice glanced at him and suddenly shrugged. She asked innocently, Isn't he still alive? The doctor said that he's not completely out of danger yet. Alice smiled elegantly and said nonchalantly, If you're asking if he can still live, then I'll answer you. As long as you send him to me and he's still breathing, I can save his life. Gong Jia continued. His vocal cords and many functional organs have been burned. Can you think of a way? Yes, I can give it a try. Can you restore these functions? Make him speak. That's right. Alice pondered for a moment before saying, If you give me enough time, I can use genetic regeneration to restore his damaged organs. When Gong Jia heard this, he was finally relieved. Alas, he saw Alice sizing up Yun Yeqing with great seriousness. Her eyes shone with unfathomable ambition. Gong Jia immediately knew what she was thinking when he saw the look in her eyes. Was she using him as a test subject? I also want to try a head transplant recently. Alice turned her head and asked, Can I use him for my experiments? Gong Jia said firmly, No. Why? Alice felt suspicious. He was undoubtedly a cripple. Most importantly, she was not interested in doing something that she was already tired of doing. Remodeling her organs was really easy, and she was already tired of it. However, she really wanted to try the head transplant surgery, although it was a little risky. But wasn't this an opportunity? Gong Jia immediately said, He's very important to me. You can't use him as an experiment. Who is he to you? He's my... Gong Jia didn't know how to explain it. Sister's adoptive father? It was rather too abrupt to mention this to Alice all of a sudden. He said, No matter what, you're not allowed to touch his brain. Cure him or at least lessen his pain. Can his facial features be restored? I can recover half of it. 50%. Chapter 2434. 50% is an optimistic result. The Gong Jia said, I'll leave him to you then. Alice took off her gloves and threw them aside. She turned to look at him calmly and suddenly smiled. Is there any reward? Reward? There should be a reward for leaving such a boring task to me. The Gong Jia said heartlessly. No. Alice's face darkened instantly. You don't have any sincerity in asking for help. I'll bring you Fanty's top-grade dry red wine next time. I'm sick of it. Missy, you're really hard to please. The Gong Jia turned to leave after saying that. Alice immediately chased after him and gave him a look. Since it's rare for you to come back, why don't we have a drink now? No. Alice thought that he was worried about Yun Yeqing, so she quickly said, Don't worry, I'll settle him down right away. The Gong Jia shook his head. I want to go home. Alice's face changed. Oh, I forgot. You haven't been back for a long time. Your father must be thinking about you. The Gong Jia walked to the door, turned around and gestured to her. Let's stop here. I'll go back first. Okay. The Gong family's main residence was located on a private island in Atlantis. Due to the need for privacy, the entire island was blocked by a signal network. The entire island was vast and even bigger than many small countries. The Gongs had already built the island into a country. Security, defense, vacation, entertainment, and so on. Everything was available. When the island was first developed, there were still many indigenous people left, but all of them were extradited to other countries by the Gongs. Other than that, there were ships stationed in the nearby waters day and night. Once they detected any abnormalities, they would activate the entire island's emergency system. Any trespassers would be mercilessly destroyed with missiles. There were also many cargo ships that got lost at sea. If they barged in by mistake, they would be immediately driven away. It could be said that this was the Hurricane Group's headquarters. If one were to overlook the entire island through a helicopter, one would easily see that in the center of the island, there was an extremely majestic and magnificent ancient castle. This ancient castle was from the time of St. Louis. Back then, when the Gong family developed this island, they did not hesitate to spend a huge sum of money to bid for this ancient castle with a long history. Furthermore, they forcefully moved the entire castle to this island and built it. Back then, when Gong Jie learned that the castle he had lived in since childhood had been moved from a place thousands of miles away to this island, he had been shocked for a long time. He had always found it inconceivable and did not know how his father had done it. Returning to the castle, he had just stepped through the door when the butler saw him. As if he had already expected his return, the butler bowed and respectfully said, "Second young master, master is waiting for you in the study." "I understand." Gong Jie went up to the fourth floor. Pushing open the door of the study, he saw a middle-aged man sitting in front of a long desk in the spacious and magnificent study, looking out of the window with his back to him. Judging from his back, this man was quite old, but he still had a graceful bearing. Chapter 24:35. His back was facing him as he held a pipe in his hand. Even when he heard the door open, he did not turn around immediately. Instead, he quietly looked out the window and said in a deep voice, "You're back." His deep voice was like a mellow whine. Gong Jie greeted respectfully, "Father, did you have a good vacation?" "Yeah. It's a rare vacation, so I rested well for a while." "The vacation is over. It's time to settle down." "Yes." Gong Jie's unruly aura could not help but lessen a little. In front of this man, he maintained a respectful and humble attitude from beginning to end. Gong Xiaoying casually placed his pipe on the windowsill and slowly turned around. The facial features that came into view, despite the traces of time, were still extraordinarily handsome. The contours of his face were as sharp as a knife, and one could vaguely see the youthful spirit of his youth. He was wearing a British-style double-breasted suit. His physique was just right. It was hard to imagine that he was already 46 years old. Thinking back, he must have been a particularly handsome man. Gong Jie's handsome eyebrows and contours were inherited from him. Gong Xiaoying sized him up and asked casually, "Do you have any thoughts about this year's plan?" "Father." Gong Jie paused for a moment, then curled his lips and said arrogantly, "The market that Hurricane Group values the most is the African market. However, in the past 3 years, the results of the African market have not been as perfect as expected. I think it's a pity. The fertile African market will bring immeasurable benefits to Hurricane Group. Why don't you divide the market under my name?" Gong Xiaoying looked at him and narrowed his eyes. Suddenly he laughed and said, "You're really arrogant. The North American market is already under your name, and now you want to take the African market under your name. You're really ambitious." After saying that, he was silent for a long time. After a pause, he suddenly snorted and said, "However, this is how I was when I was young." Gong Jie smiled. Gong Xiaoying continued, "However, you're too ambitious. If you show off and steal the limelight, aren't you worried that it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark? What's there to worry about?" Gong Xiaoying sized him up and suddenly shook his head with a smile. "It's not a good thing to be too arrogant at such a young age." Gong Jie stared deeply into Gong Xiaoying's eyes and suddenly smiled deeply. "Father values me because he appreciates my arrogance. I admire your ambition and arrogance. However, I am also worried about you." "Worried?" Gong Jie slowly walked to the table and said, "Father, this is not like you. For me, worry is superfluous, but ambition is essential." Gong Xiaoying suddenly stood up slowly and looked at him. The father and son stood facing each other. Gong Xiaoying's aura did not diminish in the slightest. His figure was tall and straight, and his aura was astonishing and imposing. He looked at Gong Jia for a long time and suddenly said cheerfully, "If you insist on taking the African market, then I'll fulfill your wish. However, you should let go of the North American market." Gong Jia nodded in agreement. Hurricane Group has indeed missed a lot of opportunities in the African market. I only hope that you can at least make up for what Hurricane has lost. Understood. Right. Chapter 2436. Hurricane Group has indeed missed a lot of opportunities in the African market. I only hope that you can at least make up for what Hurricane Group has missed out on. Understood. Oh yeah. Gong Xiaoying suddenly turned around and looked at him. Squinting, he sized him up and said slowly, "I heard that you went to the Maldives for a vacation and then went to Country Z." Gong Jia's mind buzzed. His eyelids twitched, and he looked up but pretended to be calm as he looked back at him. Yeah, you seem to be going there a lot recently." Gong Xiaoying paused for a moment, but his voice suddenly stopped. He lifted his chin and sized him up. Suddenly, his lips curled into a smile, and he said half seriously and half sarcastically, "Why? Are you keeping a woman there?" It was not a rhetorical question. His tone was casual, as though he was casually probing. "A woman? Other than this possibility, I can't think of why you're always going there." As soon as Gong Xiaoying finished speaking, Gong Jia's eyelids twitched violently. Indeed, during this period of time, he had been going to Z country frequently. Usually, he was fully immersed in his work. Even when he was on vacation, he rarely went to Asia because he was mainly responsible for North American affairs. His core was in North America, so he rarely went to Asia unless there was an emergency. Would he arouse his father's suspicions? He was a little unsure if the surveillance his father had arranged around him had found out that he was with Yun Shirshir. He also did not know how much his father knew about his whereabouts in Country Z. Thinking of this, Gong Jia raised his eyebrows and replied helplessly, "Father, you should know that I've never been interested in women." "Yeah, I know that. I don't know why, but this is one of the things you don't seem to understand. When it comes to women, you're especially dull. When the iron tree blooms, bring a woman back for me to see." As Gong Xiaoying spoke, he turned around and lazily sat down at the table. He leaned back slightly and looked up at him with a hint of reproach. "If only you were half as glorious as I was when I was young, I wouldn't be so worried about you." Gong Jia frowned blankly. "Father, are you going to talk about your romantic past again? I don't want to hear it." "Ha ha." Gong Xiaoying smiled and shook his head. Then he said in a half-serious, half-commanding tone, "I don't mean anything else. Hurry up and bring me a daughter-in-law. That's the most important thing." "Another woman." Gong Jia looked a little impatient. He raised his head arrogantly and said arrogantly, "None of them caught my eye. How is it possible that there isn't anyone that he likes? A woman's attraction to a man is a primal instinct, unless..." Gong Xiaoying narrowed his eyes. "Unless my son likes men." Gong Jia's face darkened. He looked at him gloomily. "Are you serious?" Gong Xiaoying retorted coldly. "What else could it be? You hang around with that bunch of men all day. How many women do you see in a day? You keep saying that there isn't anyone that catches your eye, but the point is, the number of women you've seen since you were young can be counted on your fingers." Gong Jia's lips twitched violently. But this was the truth. Chapter 2437. Other than Alice, he rarely had any deep contact with other women since he was young. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in women, but all his focus was on the company's affairs. Hence, he didn't have the heart to care about matters of the heart. Gong Xiaoying couldn't figure it out. He looked at his son in puzzlement as if he was looking at an iron tree. He stared at Gong Jia and suddenly asked suspiciously, "Don't you need women?" Gong Jia snorted coldly. "I don't need them." "Oh," Gong Xiaoying said, dragging out the last syllable. He looked at him again and suddenly asked, "Don't you have any physiological needs?" Cough. Gong Jia's expression changed awkwardly. He turned his body slightly and his fringe covered his eyes. His deep eyes were slightly embarrassed and glanced away. "I'll settle it myself." Gong Xiaoying didn't know whether to laugh or cry at these words. Settle it yourself? Cough. Gong Jia was even more embarrassed. He explained, I don't usually have any special needs. It would have been better if he didn't explain. Once he did, Gong Xiaoying's thoughts went astray. Didn't have any special needs? How was that possible? Didn't he know men well? Could it be that his dull son had sexual apathy? Or was it that a certain part of his body hadn't developed well? That was impossible. When his son was 18 years old, he even took a bath with him. His son's puberty was very vigorous. Gong Xiaoying was so worried that his heart was about to break. He gently rubbed his chin as his conflicted eyes suddenly fell on a certain part of his nephew's body that was hard to put into words. Gong Jia followed his gaze and fell on his lower abdomen. He was stunned and his handsome face darkened. He said expressionlessly, I don't have any other instructions. I still have something to do. With that, he turned and walked out of the door. Gong Xiaoying immediately said, Wait. Gong Jia didn't stop walking. Gong Xiaoying casually threw a string of gold-threaded cedar at him. Stop. Do you hear me? Gong Jia turned around and asked impatiently, Do you have any other orders? Gong Xiaoying suddenly stood up and walked to his side. He sized up Gong Jia, only to see him frowning impatiently. His eyes were closed, but his face was strangely red. This kid's face had turned so red after just a few words. Gong Xiaoying hated him for being so disappointing. TSK, why is your face so red? He suddenly patted his shoulder sympathetically. When I was your age, I already had a child. You haven't even tasted a woman before. My heart aches for you. Who wants your heartache? Gong Jia thought to himself. However, Gong Xiaoying let out a long sigh and said seriously, Son, work harder and give birth to a grandson for me to play with. Could it be that he thought that a grandson could be conjured out of thin air just because he wanted to? Gong Jia said expressionlessly, If you want a grandson, you have to find a woman who's willing to give birth to one for me. Gong Xiaoying frowned and glanced at him. He said rudely, Women who are willing to give birth to your children can line up from here to Siberia. You're the one who's disappointing. He paused, narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, I see that you're quite close to Alice. That girl seems to be quite good. Alice? Chapter 2438. It was probably because he accidentally saw her dissecting a corpse in the research room that he was traumatized by women. When Alice was eating Western food, her posture was very elegant. She cut the steak with her knife and fork, but Gong Jia always felt that her technique was as if she was dissecting a corpse. What a terrifying woman. It was okay to have a drink occasionally, but if they were to date, it would be a nightmare. Oh, Gong Xiaoying replied. Suddenly, he thought of something and said casually, I heard from the report that the bodyguard who was ordered to protect you said that he saw you with a woman and that you were having fun. Gong Jia's heart skipped a beat. He turned his face slightly and glanced at Gong Xiaoying's expression. Seeing that there was no abnormal expression on his face, he felt slightly relieved. He pretended to be calm and asked, What did they say? They said that they saw you on a date with a woman drinking coffee going to the market, and that you were very close. Gong Jia frowned. Could it be the last time? After he finished his work, he went to Country Z. When Yun Shishir took him to the market to eat spicy hot pot, they played many games, shooting, throwing rings, fishing. It was that time that he realized that someone was following them. However, he had clearly warned those people not to reveal his whereabouts to his father. He didn't expect that his father would hear about it. How much did they say about his sister and how much did they report to his father? His father's seemingly careless probing, what exactly was he trying to test him for? Gong Jia didn't know how much Gong Xiaoying knew. However, after examining his expression, he didn't probe too much. It was as if he didn't know Yun Shishir's identity. His expression softened and he said, I go to Country Z often, but not for her. She's just a normal friend. Oh, then what are you doing it for? To find someone. Gong Xiaoying's expression changed slightly and sank, but his tone was calm. It seems that you haven't completely given up. If she's alive, I want to see her. If she's dead, I want to see her corpse. Otherwise, how can I be satisfied? Gong Jia pretended to be calm. At the same time he was probing. Gong Xiaoying clenched his fists slightly. When Gong Jie saw this, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that his father did not know the truth that his sister was still alive for the time being. Although he is somewhat ashamed, he must keep the secret before his sister agrees to return to the Mujia. This is what he promised. Gong Xiaoying, on the other hand, looked a little forlorn. He knew who his brother was looking for. She was the daughter he had with Mu Qingcheng. According to the Gong Jia, her name was Shishir. It was a very nice name. When he first learned that the woman he loved had given birth to a pair of children for him, a pair of twins, he was so happy that he didn't know how to describe it. However, it was a pity that no matter how hard he tried, he still wasn't able to meet him. When he rescued Gong Jie from the hospital clearly told him that the other child had died and his body was nowhere to be found. Gong Xiaoying almost broke down. If Gong Jie hadn't saved him, he really didn't know what crazy things he would have done in a fit of anger. However, after so many years, he had already accepted this cruel fact. However, this son of his couldn't get over it. He had been looking for traces of that child and never gave up a chance. Chapter 2439. He didn't stop him, nor did he stop him. Perhaps he was also secretly hoping for a miracle. However, his rationality told him that he shouldn't be obsessed with a fact that had already been settled. Since she's already gone, you should be more open-minded. But what if my sister is still alive? Gong Jie suddenly asked softly, trying to sound him out. Back then, the hospital said that she had already died in a car accident. But what if a miracle happens? Gong Jie stared into his eyes. Gong Xiaoying looked up at him. Looking at his son's stubborn and paranoid expression, his lips suddenly trembled for a while. His facial muscles suddenly trembled slightly. Until now, when he mentioned that child, his eyes would still turn red with emotion. If she's still alive, if such a miracle really happens, I'm willing to exchange everything for it. Even if he had to exchange all his wealth for it. These words weren't just empty words. Mu Qingcheng was the woman he loved the most. He was crazy about her. Not being able to see her for the last time became the biggest regret in his life. Therefore, after she died, he would keep any woman who had the slightest resemblance to her by his side, whether it was out of consolation or in search of warmth. After losing her, all the women he loved from then on looked like her. Gong Jie heard this and frowned slightly. Even if it was in exchange for hatred? Gong Jie really wanted to ask this, but it would be too abrupt. He sighed and suddenly said, "Father, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." After that, Gong Jie left the study. When he looked back, he saw Gong Xiaoying slowly walking to the window and holding on to the windowsill. Through this window, he could see a patch of Chinese roses planted in the back garden. His back view, however, looked incomparably lonely. In the basement, the sound of whips and men groaning in pain could be heard. In the detention room, a few men knelt on the ground in a row. Their clothes were tattered and there were obvious traces of being whipped. They were dripping with blood. Gong Jie sat on a chair with his legs crossed elegantly. After 10 lashes, the men looked very disheveled. These were the bodyguards who had followed him back then. "Let's stop," he casually ordered, and his subordinate immediately withdrew his whip. Gong Jie sized them up and suddenly asked, "How much did you tell my father?" Dust danced in the quiet air. A beam of light from the skylight shone on their faces. They all appeared to be in a sorry state as they endured the pain. Gong Jie's voice became even harsher. "In your eyes, do my words have no authority? Second young master. Second young master, please calm down." Gong Jie threw the burnt cigarette on the ground expressionlessly. He leaned forward slightly, stared at them and said word by word, "What did I say? Don't tell my father a single word about that woman. What did you do?" The group remained silent. Gong Jie smiled coldly. "Very well." He suddenly stood up and approached them, his tone even colder. "Do you remember that I warned you that if you leak any information, I will kill you?" Chapter 2440. Second young master. "If you want to kill us, do as you please. However, we are extremely loyal to the chief, and we dare not hide anything from him." However, we did not say anything in detail. Because of second young master's special instructions, We didn't report the details of the woman's background even though we already knew the details of her background. Oh, Gong Jie sized him up. What information do you have? That woman should be the eldest daughter of the Gong family who was left behind. Before this, we specially investigated and confirmed her identity. Gong Jie's gaze turned cold. How did you find out? As long as we have the features, it is not difficult to investigate her background. Unlike Gong Jie's previous investigation, there were no clues. Searching all over the world was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. However, once they had confirmed their target, they would investigate their background based on their facial features. Not to mention the Gong family's background, even those with a little bit of connections could be easily found, let alone a famous artist like Yun Shishir. Gong Jie pondered for a moment and said, "What did you say to father?" The chief asked about your whereabouts during this period. We only said that you have been very close to a woman recently, and your relationship seems to be very intimate. The chief thinks that woman is your lover. Achoo! Yun Shishir, who was far away in China, suddenly sneezed. Early in the morning, she rushed to the location of the opening ceremony. Qin Zhou informed her the next night that the opening ceremony would be held early in the morning. Yun Shishir questioned, "Didn't she receive the notice that the opening ceremony would be held a few days later?" However, Qin Zhou replied that the staff in charge of the opening ceremony made a mistake and picked the wrong time. When they realized the mistake, they informed the staff overnight and changed it to the next day. Because tomorrow is an auspicious day, there won't be any good days after that. The opening ceremony was held in a village by the mountain road. The village still retained the ancient architecture of the Beijing faction, but it was obvious that it had been renovated. The ancient charm of the ancient architecture was retained, and many modern elements were added, giving it a unique style. This village would be the place where the female lead grew up. When Yun Shishir arrived at the scene, she immediately saw Gu Xingze surrounded by the media. He was wearing sunglasses and was surrounded by the media. With his outstanding height, she could see his cold and handsome face at a glance. Her expression relaxed a little. Last night, she heard that the male lead had been decided. Gu Xingze would play the male lead, and Hua Jin would join the cast as a supporting actor. After the ban was lifted, Gu Xingze posted on Weibo to announce that he was going to star in a new drama. Very quickly, the news hit the hot search list. When the fanatical fans saw the news, they were so excited that they teared up. Even though Gu Xingze had disappeared for a few months, many fans suspected that he had quietly left the entertainment industry. However, with just one Weibo post, he strongly demonstrated his extraordinary popularity. The rallying power of a heavenly king was truly unstoppable. When she heard the news from Qin Zhou last night, Yun Shishir felt sincerely gratified. While Yun Shishir was in a daze, Hua Jin suddenly walked over and touched her shoulder. "Shishir, you're here?" She turned her head and saw Hua Jin standing in front of her with a charming smile. Morning. Chapter 2441. Hua Jin yawned and grumbled regretfully. "I only received the notice early in the morning and rushed over. I didn't even choose my outfit carefully." As he said this, he asked nervously, "Do I look good in this outfit today?" He had always been mindful of his image. Yun Shishir took a serious look at him. Today he was wearing a black woolen coat, a white shirt and a black shirt. Yun Shishir hesitated for a moment before giving a pertinent comment. It's quite normal. I have no choice. I'm not the main lead, so I can't steal the limelight from the main lead." As Hua Jin said this, he glared at Gu Xingze's back view, which was surrounded by the media. "I heard that he was banned some time ago. I thought I could replace him, but I didn't expect him to make a comeback." After a pause, he said regretfully, "I could have been the male lead in this script." Yun Shishir smiled and agreed with him, but she was a little dazed. Today's Hua Jin was different from before. In the past, he was always lifeless in the filming crew. No matter who he met, he would always have an arrogant look on his face. However, she happened to see him today. When a crew member saw him, he greeted him fearfully and he replied with a smile. He became gentler and more humble than before. It was as if this was how he was supposed to be. Hua Jin saw that she was in a daze and waved his hand in front of her face unhappily. "Why are you ignoring me? Did you not sleep well? Look at your eyes, they look so listless." Yun Shishir rubbed her eyes. I didn't sleep well last night. Here. Hua Jin passed her a bottle of eye drops and urged her. You're going to be on camera soon. What if you're so listless and ugly? At most, I'll make it into an emoticon package. Who knows, I might even become famous, Yun Shishir said self-deprecatingly. Hua Jin imagined it and chuckled. It's quite interesting to imagine it. Yun Shishir couldn't help but think of her own dark history. Previously, a netizen had taken a screenshot of a scene in the movie. In the end, because it was a crying scene, she hid in a corner outside the wedding and broke down and cried. At that moment, the screenshot was paused and her expression was so ugly that it was turned into an emoticon package and passed around by the netizens. Yun Shishir really felt that the emoticon package was ugly to the extreme. Yu and Xiaoichen saw it and even used it as wallpaper. After looking at it for a while, they actually felt this expression. Your dark history is much more fun than Curator King's. The netizens can play with it for a long time. She raised her hands in surrender. I give up. Just as she finished speaking, she caught sight of a group of people walking over from the corner of her eye. Gu Xingzi walked toward her and stopped right in front of her. Each in S's. There was a slight awkwardness in the air. The media looked at each other and focused their cameras on the two of them. They didn't want to miss even the tiniest detail. Regarding the two of them, the media had been making groundless accusations, hoping to find some clues. Chapter 2442. Most of the audience's expectations for this drama came from the pairing of the Golden Boy and the Jade Girl. Therefore, any news about the two of them would definitely be on the front page. Gu Xingzi looked at her tenderly for a long time before he brushed past her and left. The group of reporters was stunned for half a second before they followed him like a swarm of bees. When the director arrived at the scene and saw the scene, he was furious and flew into a rage. Where did all these flies come from? Didn't I repeatedly emphasize that reporters without media credentials are not allowed to enter the venue? I don't know how these reporters managed to sneak into the venue, but they've made a mess and occupied all the media seats. The director immediately sent someone to maintain order. The opening ceremony began smoothly. Throughout the entire process, Hua Jin stuck to Yun Shishir's side. He would either complain that the venue was too noisy or gossip with her. It was as if he had opened up a chatterbox. However, Yun Shishir did not find him annoying at all. Instead, she thought that Hua Jin was really cute. When the ceremony was about to end, a staff member suddenly ran over and whispered to the director. Director, Jiyan is here. Jiyan? Yes. That newbie. The investor specially arranged for her to join the cast as the second female lead. Oh. The director pondered for a moment and suddenly frowned in displeasure. Why is she only here now? She said that there was an accident on the road, so she's late. An accident? Yes, her car was rear-ended. She took a taxi and rushed here after dealing with the accident. The director muttered. The ceremony is almost over. What is she doing here? Is she trying to make a fool of herself in front of the media? Tell her to get lost. Director, I don't think that's a good idea. The staff member had some misgivings. She's the second female lead appointed by the investor. If we drive her home, she'll cry and make a scene in front of the investor. If the investor gets angry, we won't be able to do anything. The director's facial muscles twitched a few times before he finally said, Let her in. Okay. Yun Shishir vaguely heard some of the conversation and asked curiously, Who is this Ji Yan? Hua Jin said quietly, I heard that she's a newbie with a strong background who landed in the cast directly. Where did you hear that? That's what I heard. Many people on the internet are trying to find out her identity because many people think that she looks very similar to Yan Bingqing. When Yun Shishir heard this, her heart skipped a beat, and her expression froze. Yan Bingqing? Yes. Hua Jin nodded and said. Didn't Yan Bingqing disappear some time ago? Then Ji Yan posted a photo of her makeup on Weibo, and the netizens all said that the newcomer looks like Yan Bingqing. Many netizens even suspected that Yan Bingqing had disappeared some time ago, because she had secretly gone abroad to have plastic surgery. Most likely it's going to be melted down and remolded, right? Plastic surgery has a time limit. No matter how good you look at the beginning, it's useless. However, after a long time some side effects will come. At that time you need to be remolded. I also suspect that it's Yan Bingqing, but she just changed her stage name. At most, her eyes have become bigger, her nose has become more prominent, her chin has become a little sharper, and her breasts seem to have become a little bigger. Chapter 2443. Oh my God. So I'm not the only one who's suspicious. I also think that this Ji Yan is very suspicious. I also heard that after plastic surgery, it's necessary to take out the original prosthesis and reshape it. Look, Lin Ji's face is swollen recently. Could it be that she secretly went for a hyaluronic acid injection? Tisk tsk. There's no such thing as a natural beauty in the entertainment industry. I think that Yun Shirshir also looks like she came from a plastic surgery background. Yun Shirshir was a little doubtful. Are they really that alike? Hua Jin pondered. Well, although the facial features are a little different, the foundation is very similar. Do you have her makeup photos? No, I didn't save them. Hua Jin asked again. Isn't she coming soon? As soon as his voice fell, a staff member came over with a gorgeously dressed woman. Yun Shirshir fixed her eyes on the woman, and her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock and let out an ah in disbelief. Seeing the look of surprise on her face, Hua Jin followed her gaze and saw Ji Yan walking over closely behind the staff member. That's her, he said. She's Ji Yan. Yun Shirshir asked in astonishment. Hua Jin nodded. Yes. Do you also think that she looks very similar to Yan Bingqing? Yes. Not just a little, but they really look alike. Yun Shirshir carefully observed her for a long time. Indeed, the foundation was exactly the same except for a few differences. This Ji Yan's eyes were bigger, and the inner and outer corners of her eyes were opened. Her nose seemed to be a little higher, and her chin seemed to be sharper, probably because she had undergone bone-grinding surgery. But in this way, although she was beautiful, she was not as elegant as Yan Bingqing's original temperament. Yan Bingqing's appearance was very outstanding. She had big eyes, bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. Her face was rich in collagen, and the curve of her jaw was not round, but it was not sharp either. She had the elegant aura of a queen, and her every movement was graceful. However, if this was really Yan Bingqing after the plastic surgery, her face had become sharp, but her face was like a product on the assembly line. There was no recognition at all, just like those young models on the internet. Although they looked younger and more beautiful, they just lacked a temperament. Yun Shirshir could not help but suspect the identity of this woman named Ji Yan in front of her. She really does look like Yan Bingqing. It was no wonder that the netizens were suspicious. She also felt that Yan Bingqing was 99% similar. When Yun Shirshir looked at her, the woman looked at her too. Two pairs of eyes collided in the air. Yun Shirshir could not help but be startled. She saw Ji Yan walking toward the director with a pair of enchanting eyes that vaguely revealed a ruthless and cold light. However, it was only a brief collision, and Ji Yan quickly withdrew her gaze. Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was shocked. It's her. Yun Shirshir repeatedly recalled the gaze that Ji Yan threw her just now with lingering fear. It was ruthless and cold, like a sharp sword that wanted to pierce through her. Seeing her pale face, Hua Jin asked in confusion. Shirshir, what's wrong? This Ji Yan might be Yan Bingqing herself. How can you be so sure? That gaze can't be wrong. Chapter 2444. That gaze can't be wrong. It was full of bone-deep hatred, as if she wanted to tear her into pieces. Yun Shirshir immediately asked the staff, Is that Ji Yan Yan Bingqing? Yan Bingqing? The staff widened his eyes and shook his head quickly. No, you're not. Yun Shirshir was surprised. Although I also think that Ji Yan and Yan Bingqing look quite similar, they are indeed not Yan Bingqing. Wasn't Yan Bingqing banned before? This Ji Yan probably had plastic surgery to look like Yan Bingqing, right? Her stage name even has the word Yi in it. Let me guess. The staff whispered in her ear. I'm guessing that she must have had plastic surgery to look like Yan Bingqing and hooked up with a sugar daddy. I heard that she didn't even have to audition before she directly squeezed out a B-list actress and landed in the production team. There are a lot of good newcomers these days. Hua Jin was also a little surprised. She's not Yan Bingqing? The staff nodded and said disapprovingly, Yes. If she's Yan Bingqing, she's so beautiful and yet she still went under the knife. Isn't she sick? How is that possible? Hua Jin obviously didn't believe it. The facial features are very similar. The staff member smiled and then sighed. Don't underestimate plastic surgery. After saying that, he immediately went back to work as he had other things to do. Yun Shirshir and Hua Jin looked at each other. After the opening ceremony, Hua Jin pestered Yun Shirshir to play mahjong. Let's go. Shirshir, let's play mahjong. Yun Shirshir said gloomily. You seem to be very energetic today. Don't you like mahjong? I don't like it. Yun Shirshir made an X gesture. I refuse to gamble. I don't gamble. Who else is there besides you and me? Yun Shirshir's question left Hua Jin at a loss. Qinzhou. No. Hua Jin had just dialed Qinzhou's number to express his intentions when he immediately rejected. I'm not interested in mahjong. Lord Qinzhou. Beep beep beep. The call was cut off. Hua Jin frowned as he held the phone in his hand. Yun Shirshir patted his shoulder sympathetically. Let's go home. No. Hua Jin suddenly suggested. Let's play mahjong at your place. Hua Jin suddenly thought of something and asked with a pale face. Is the Great Demon King here? What Great Demon King? It's. Hua Jin said nervously. Your brother. Yun Shirshir burst out laughing. She immediately thought of the two of them who were in a sorry state because they lost in a game of Fight the Landlord on New Year's Eve. It seemed that Hua Jin was traumatized by Gong Jia. Before meeting Gong Jia, she had always thought that Hua Jin was a complete little demon king. She did not expect that he would be subdued by Gong Jia. Gong Jia was the real Great Demon King. After being pestered by Hua Jin, Yun Shirshir finally agreed. When the two of them reached home, Muyaja was not home yet. Yu and Xiaoichen were at home. Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows suspiciously and asked, When does school start? Stupid mommy, didn't I tell you? It's next Monday. Oh, that means school starts in 4 days. Okay. Chapter 24:45. Yeah. Hua Jin walked over and squatted down in front of him. He pulled him into his arms and said teasingly, The opening ceremony for the new drama ended this morning, so I came to play with you. What do you want to play? Do you know how to play mahjong? Yes. Yu paused and glanced at him in disdain. But Muichen doesn't know how to play mahjong. 3 people can't play. Hua Jin was instantly troubled. That's right. We can't play mahjong with 3 people. Yu asked Muichen. Do you know how to play mahjong? Xiaoichen sipped on his yogurt and shook his head blankly. No. Yun Shirshir suddenly thought of someone. I thought of someone. It's convenient for me to come over. Who is it? Yun Shirshir found the phone book, took out a business card and dialed the number. When the call went through, she smiled and said, Junemo, I'm Shirshir. Are you busy now? It's Shirshir. Junmo's neutral and deep voice came from the other end. She replied gently, I'm not busy. What's up? Where are you? At home. What a coincidence. Do you like to play mahjong? We're short of 1 player. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Yun Shirshir ran over to open the door and saw Junemo standing at the door. When she saw her, she smiled and greeted her. Long time no see. Yun Shirshir welcomed her in. Yes, Junemo, long time no see. Junemo recalled. Speaking of which, the last time we met was at the celebration party for the Green Apple. Speaking of the Green Apple, in fact, Junemo had played the male supporting role in the movie. During the screening process, there were many discussions about this role among netizens. After all, it was rare for an actress to play a male role. At most, some dramas adapted from Chinese opera would use the role of the female lead. Very few mainstream commercial movies would do this. Qinzhou took a risk. But it had to be said that although Junmo's acting skills were inexperienced, her emotions were immersed in the movie, and she played the role of the supporting actor with the kind of feeling that the audience was looking forward to. In addition, her looks were outstanding. She had good looks that many young actors couldn't match. Her facial features were handsome, and she had an elegant and gentle temperament. After the movie was released, apart from Yin Xiachuan and Yin Dongyu, her role was also very eye-catching. It set off a trend of androgyny. Many girls imitated her style of dress, hairstyle, and makeup. Recently, he had taken on many movies. What surprised Yun Shirshir the most was that she actually accepted a spy movie, Oriole Behind. This movie was produced by Central Pictures, and was made up of veteran actors. As the only rookie in the cast, Jun Mo's performance was highly anticipated by the media. As soon as Jun Mo arrived, everyone was present. The four of them sat down to play mahjong. When Xiaoyichen saw that they were playing mahjong, he didn't want to watch TV anymore. He put the TV aside and went over to Yun Shishir's side to watch the game quietly. The four of them chatted as they played mahjong. Hua Jin and Jun Mo had acted in a television drama together before. The two of them got along well in the production team. Hua Jin had a good impression of Jun Mo, so they got along very well. Hua Jin and Jun Mo were both very addicted to smoking. When their cards were good, they would smoke a cigarette. When their cards were bad, they would smoke another cigarette. Fortunately, Yu and Xiaoyichen didn't mind. At most, they would avoid the two of them and grumble, "You're so addicted to smoking." When Jun Mo heard this, she immediately apologized. "I'm sorry." Hua Jin also stopped smoking. Chapter 2446. However, Yu said, "It's okay. There's no pregnant woman here." Jun Mo couldn't help but laugh. "You know that pregnant women can't smell smoke?" "Yes." Yu cursed silently in his heart. Had he seriously checked the information? Back then, he thought that his mommy was pregnant, so he did a lot of research. In the end, she wasn't pregnant, and he was even depressed for a period of time. Hua Jin muttered as he played mahjong. "Today is the opening ceremony of the new drama. Gu Xingze is making a comeback." Yun Shishir's hand froze in the middle of picking the cards. She lifted her gaze to glance at the idol before lowering her head again to sort the cards. "East wind." Hua Jin also threw a east wind and said, "If it weren't for him, the male lead of this drama would have been me. In the end, Gu Xingze came out of nowhere and intercepted me." Jun Mo mercilessly exposed him. The investors of this drama liked Gu Xingze to begin with. "How can you say that he intercepted me? I can't accept it. Why can he and Shishir be nominated as the best on-screen couple? Shishir and I are more compatible." Yun Shishir's lips twitched. Jun Mo continued to expose her. "Compared to Xingze, you're far inferior. The actresses who acted with him became famous." I'm not convinced." Jun Mo suddenly thought of something and silently sized up Yun Shishir. Then she said, "Some time ago, I saw Xingze with a woman who looked very similar to Shishir." Yun Shishir was stunned. She looked up and said blankly, "Huh? A woman who looks like me?" Jun Mo said, "I thought it was you. That woman really looks like you. Judging from her figure, she's probably a young model. However, although her facial features are similar, it's obvious that she's undergone surgery." This news was even on the news. Yun Shishir was shocked. "Could you have seen wrongly?" I went up to greet him. Yun Shishir widened her eyes in surprise. Jun Mo explained. "Because I got along well with Xingze on set, I saw him and went up to greet him. That's why I saw that woman up close and dispelled my suspicions. Although they were similar, there were still some differences. After all, no matter how brilliant the plastic surgery is, it's impossible to perfectly replicate a person." "Oh." Yun Shishir's expression remained calm. "Xingze has always had very few scandals in the industry, and there's rarely any gossip. Indeed, that's why I was very surprised when I saw him and that woman coming out of the hotel. As far as I can remember, he never had any women around him." Hotel Yun Shishir's fingertips trembled slightly, but her eyes quickly regained their calmness and concealed the trace of surprise. Hotel. It was hard for people not to exaggerate when he walked in and out of the hotel with a woman in his arms. Coming out of the hotel, what else could it be? Yun Shishir suddenly furrowed her brows and felt a little uncomfortable. It wasn't that she felt unbalanced, but she heard from Jun Mo that the woman was a young model and had obviously undergone plastic surgery. In her heart, Gu Xingze was perfect, like a Prince Charming, and could not be tarnished. The young model industry was very messy. In order to climb up the ranks, those young models would do anything to climb up. Could this young model have used Gu Xingze as a springboard to climb up the ranks? Did Gu Xingze have feelings for her? Chapter 2447. Just as Yun Shishir was letting her imagination run wild, she heard Hua Jin say disapprovingly, "After all, men have their biological needs too. As a popular idol, it's impossible for him to have a girlfriend openly." Gu Xingze is a normal man, so of course he has his biological needs. I've always been surprised that he hasn't had any scandals in the industry. I thought he was an immortal who didn't belong to the mortal world. I didn't expect him to be an ordinary man. Yun Shishir picked her cards silently, but she didn't agree with Hua Jin's words. That wasn't the case. Gu Xingze wasn't an ordinary man. Junemo said quietly, "Actually, I'm not surprised. Maybe Gu Xingze is also serious." "Can't celebrities have private lives?" Yun Shishir suddenly said gloomily. "Even if he has a girlfriend, he shouldn't be restricted." Hua Jin said, "Of course celebrities can have private lives. As long as it's not exposed to the public, especially idols, hardcore fans won't be able to stand it. Just like you. You're very popular now, but if news of your marriage is exposed, it will affect your career." "Affect?" "Yes. You can act as a young girl in idol dramas now, but if you get married and have children, the fans will feel awkward and find it difficult to get into character." "Hua Jin, does the company have requirements for you too?" Yun Shishir suddenly asked curiously. "Of course. In the past it was explicitly stated that dating was not allowed." Hua Jin said, "This restriction is even stricter for male celebrities. The company absolutely forbids me from dating." Previously, when Gu Xingze and a female celebrity were involved in a scandal, a fan jumped off a building to commit suicide. This piece of news was sensational at the time and caused a huge uproar. The anti-fans on the internet were all denouncing Gu Xingze. In the end, the superstar stepped forward to issue an apology and clarify the scandal. That poor fan actually jumped off a building to commit suicide because of a scandal. "It's not worth it," Junemo said. "Gu Xingze's fan army is very scary. I'm really surprised that you can become popular, Shishir. Maybe it's because you're more likable." In the past, Gu Xingze was rumored to have had plastic surgery on their faces. Although they were pretty, they looked mean and unlikable. Your character in the movie is more likable, so there aren't many haters. Yun Shishir said in a daze, "It's really tough being a celebrity." Xingze. In the hotel, Gu Xingze was wearing a bathrobe. He sat on the sofa and read his script silently. A pretty woman walked out of the bathroom and called out to him softly, but seeing that he was indifferent, she immediately came to his side, put his script aside, straddled him, lifted his chin and said unhappily, "Are you still reading your script? You've been looking at it for the whole afternoon, and you're ignoring me even when I talk to you." Gu Xingze did not seem to be annoyed by her coquettish behavior. He lifted his eyes and looked at her beautiful face. Her facial features and eyebrows were extremely similar to Yun Shishir's. Especially the contours, it was like a carbon copy. He held her chin and kissed it gently. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's wrong?" "I just feel bored." The woman wrapped her arms around his shoulders and snuggled up to him coquettishly. "You've been reading your script and ignoring me. Of course I feel bored." Chapter 2448. Gu Xingze lowered his head expressionlessly and kissed her lips. However, no matter how much he kissed her, he felt that it was tasteless. There was no feeling. It was as if he was chewing wax. Just as the woman was anticipating his next move, his kiss came to an abrupt end. Gu Xingze pushed her away gently and took the script. He flipped to the page that he had marked earlier and started reading it again. The woman seemed to have read his mind and stopped fooling around. She sat down obediently and leaned on his shoulder. She asked curiously, "Are you acting as a racer in the new drama?" "Yeah. I heard that you're a racer, so your driving skills should be pretty good." Gu Xingze flipped to the next page silently. His attitude was very indifferent. The woman seemed to have noticed his indifferent attitude and frowned in disappointment. She knew very well in her heart that after this night, their relationship would come to an end. She met Gu Xingze at a private party. The atmosphere in the pub was lively and abnormally noisy. Men and women were indulging in debauchery. However, he was the only one who sat quietly in the corner. He didn't drink or participate in the hubbub. He only looked at the stage silently with a cold expression. At that time she had just debuted. The company saw that she looked like Yun Shishir and arranged for her to undergo plastic surgery. The plastic surgeon adjusted her facial features according to Yun Shishir's model. Hence, she immediately caught his attention at that party. He was the Prince Charming in her heart, and also her first man. However, the process was like a moth flying into a flame. She threw herself at him passionately without any complaints or regrets. However, she realized that from the beginning to the end she was just a substitute. What he was searching for in her was the shadow of another woman. That shadow was probably Wuxia, right? She had watched the movie The Green Apple and felt that Gu Xing's so-called acting was just a show of his true feelings. Acting could be deceiving, but the feelings in his eyes could not be. There was no pretense. All the affection seemed to be able to penetrate a person's soul. She was envious, extremely envious. More than once, he caressed her face and looked at her, but it was as if he was looking at another woman through her. She felt like a substitute, but she was also immersed in this relationship. At the beginning of their relationship, it was just that each of them had their own needs. She wanted to get some resources, but he was just looking for comfort from her. She could tell that he was very lonely. Whether it was physical or psychological, after being suppressed for so long, it was as if he was sick. However, even though it was hard to control his emotions, he still had to control them well. From the beginning, he had said, "Don't get too immersed in the role. Everyone just wants what they want." She knew in her heart that he had no feelings for her. When he kissed her just now, she seemed to feel his helplessness and disappointment from that ambiguous kiss. She also felt that this relationship had finally reached its climax. Until midnight, he was still reading the script. It was as if he did not feel tired at all. Or perhaps he had put all his energy into the script. That way he would feel less tired. The woman knew very well that everything should end here. Chapter 2449. She knew very well that no matter how much she messed around, she would never get what she really wanted. Hence, she stood up and obediently entered the room. She tactfully put on her clothes and carried her bag. When she walked out, Gu Xingze was still reading the script. However, there was an extra check on the coffee table. She walked over and picked up the check. It was a heart-wrenching number. The woman smiled and thanked him gratefully. "Thank you." Gu Xingze quietly flipped a page with a cold expression. She suddenly walked over and hugged him gently. She asked softly, "Xingze, you love that woman very much, don't you?" She did not say the name of the woman called Wuxia. Gu Xingze finally looked away from the script. He looked up and his eyes were twinkling. "If you like her, why don't you be together with her?" The woman was curious. With his charm, what woman would not succumb to his tenderness? Gu Xingze stared at her for a long time and finally said, "I can give her everything, but I can't love her." He could give her everything, but he could not love her. Why? The woman did not understand and was extremely surprised. Gu Xingze smiled mockingly. "Because it will only make her suffer." The woman opened her mouth in shock and frowned. Her heart ached. She looked at him and did not say anything. She quietly put the check into her bag and turned to leave without saying a word. Gu Xingze looked at the script and highlighted the key points. The plot was that after the female lead found out that the male lead's father was the one who had caused her father's downfall, she painfully confessed to the male lead. "Please don't love me. Your love will only make me suffer. Let go, please let go." He closed the script and closed his eyes slightly. His eyelashes trembled slightly. The woman lowered her head and left the hotel. Little did she know that when she opened the hotel door, the paparazzi who were hiding dozens of meters away raised their cameras and snapped a few shots of her leaving. However, she was completely unaware of it. She waved her hand, got into a taxi and left. After she left, the man raised his camera and flipped through the images he had just taken. He laughed joyfully. "Okay, time to pack up. Go back and submit your manuscript." The next day, a set of photos was exposed on Weibo, causing a great sensation. On Qingguang Entertainment's official Weibo, a group of photos were published. There were a total of 6 still photos and 3 moving pictures. Among them, there were a few photos of Gu Xingze walking into a hotel with a woman in his arms. After zooming in, the woman's back was facing him, so it was difficult to recognize her face. However, Gu Xingze's facial features were especially recognizable. It was easy to recognize that it was Gu Xingze himself. There were a few pictures of a woman leaving the hotel alone, getting into a taxi and leaving. There were also 3 gifts from the hotel's surveillance cameras. Gu Xingze entered the room with the woman in his arms. 5 hours later, the woman left alone. Two of the photos captured the woman's face. Although the images were blurry, the woman's basic outline could still be recognized. Wasn't this Yoon Shurshur? Once the photos were published, it immediately caused a huge uproar. Many fans were shocked by Gu Xing's shocking scandal. This set of photos quickly became a hot topic. Chapter 2450. Breaking news. Orange Light Studio exposed lucky couple's secret relationship. Leaving alone after 5 hours of tryst, extremely loving. The fans were extremely concerned about the so-called relationship that had been exposed. Of course, there were two groups of fans. One group supported the lucky couple's relationship. At the same time, they complained that the company must have written rules and regulations that forbade celebrities from dating. But if it's Yoon Shurshur, we really don't mind. Please love to your heart's content. The lucky couple is so loving. I've been following them since the Love Diary. Although I'm not a die-hard fan of Gu Xingza, I feel that as a boyfriend he must be a great boyfriend. I also like Yoon Shurshur because they went to watch The Green Apple and unexpectedly felt that they were a good match. A perfect match. The other group were Gu Xingza's die-hard fans. After hearing the news, they went to Yoon Shurshur's Weibo to make a fuss. Vixen. Seducing our master Xingza. She must be trying to use Xingza's name to hype herself up. Shameless. That's right. Vixen, please keep yourself clean. Gu Xingza is our husband. Please know what's good for you and get lost. Yoon Shurshur woke up early because her schedule was packed. She had to rush for an interview in the morning, shoot a pictorial in the afternoon, and film a variety show in the evening. However, as she rinsed her mouth, she scrolled through Weibo. When she saw the trending topic Gu Xingza's relationship, she clicked on it out of curiosity. She thought that it was just idle gossip among fans, but she didn't expect to see a set of photos. Gu Xingza and woman met in a hotel at night. After 5 hours of intimacy, the woman left alone. The mysterious woman is actually Yoon Shurshur. The lucky couple relationship is confirmed. Yoon Shurshur spat a mouthful of mouthwash on the mirror. Her eyes widened as she clicked on the photos one by one. Although the pixels were blurry, it wasn't difficult to recognize that this woman's facial features were indeed very similar to hers. If she wasn't in person, she would definitely think that this was Yoon Shurshur. Most importantly, she was just lying down at home last night. How could she be shot like this? She clicked on the other photos and saw the surveillance footage of the woman holding Gu Xingza's arm as they walked into the private room of the hotel. She frowned and was a little surprised. Qinzhou suddenly called. As soon as she answered the call, Qinzhou shouted her name furiously. Shurshur. Yoon Shurshur couldn't help but hold the phone a little further away. This sound almost broke her eardrums. Why are you so angry so early in the morning? Where were you last night? Qinzhou went straight to the point. Yoon Shurshur said gloomily, I'm at home. Then, can you explain what's going on with the news on Weibo? Qinzhou obviously recognized her as the woman, because they were too alike. Yoon Shurshur said with a long face, I saw that Weibo post too. It really wasn't me. Great Qin, I've been wronged. It's not you? Qinzhou quickly calmed down, but he still asked suspiciously, Are you sure? Of course. Do you want to get a witness? Qinzhou said. There's no need. Then what's going on with those photos? I really don't know. Yoon Shurshur immediately said. I was obediently reading the script at home last night. After reading it, I went to bed. My husband can testify. Chapter 2451. I'll go and verify the situation. Beep beep beep. The guy hung up very quickly. She reckoned that he had gone to look for Gu Xingza to verify the situation. Yoon Shurshur sighed. She wiped the water off the glass and took another mouthful of mouthwash. Bam! Yu burst through the door. She raised her cell phone and rushed in with tears in her eyes. Mommy, did you cheat on me? Yoon Shurshur spat out another mouthful of mouthwash in shock. She turned around in embarrassment and saw Yu holding her cell phone. She walked over with a pained expression. Mommy, did you go out behind Daddy's back last night? Yoon Shurshur stared at him silently. Yu was bawling her eyes out. She raised her cell phone in front of her and said with tears in her eyes, Don't tell me that you went to the hotel with Gu Xingza to read the script. Early in the morning, the cell phone received a notification. Because he followed Yoon Shirshir's Weibo, the trending topic was sent to him very quickly. Yu was shocked when she saw the notification. She rushed over with her cell phone. "That's not me," Yoon Shirshir explained helplessly. "Idiot, take a good look. Is the woman in the photo your dearest mommy?" Yu looked at the photo suspiciously and suddenly said, "That's right. Dong." Yoon Shirshir gave him a knock on the head. "How can you mistake your dearest mommy for someone else? I'm so disappointed in you." Yu immediately looked at her cell phone again and again. She finally sighed and patted her chest gently. She was so agitated that she almost burst into tears. "You scared me. I saw wrongly. That's not mommy in the photo. Mommy's legs aren't that short." "You actually suspect that your mommy is having an affair with another man?" Yoon Shirshir's gaze was dangerous and sinister. Yu immediately hugged his mother's long legs and explained, "Mommy, Yu knows he was wrong. Yu just woke up, so the diffraction isn't good." Yoon Shirshir elegantly wiped her face with a towel and snorted arrogantly. "Humph. What's the point of explaining now? Men drag him out and behead him." Yu hugged her and explained to her. Suddenly he said curiously, "But this woman looks so much like mommy. Did she get plastic surgery to look like mommy?" "Who knows? I don't care." Yoon Shirshir slapped his chubby hands away. "Get out of the way. Mommy won't make it in time." As soon as she walked out of the bathroom, Yu followed behind her eagerly and asked eagerly, "Mommy, do you have work today?" "Yes, it's full." "Then I'll prepare breakfast for mommy." "It's okay. I don't have time." Yoon Shirshir took a sandwich from the fridge and heated it up. Yu passed her a glass of warm milk. "Be good and stay at home with Xiaoyi-chen. Don't bully your brother. Remember to wake daddy up for work later." "Oh, got it." Yu watched as Yoon Shirshir left. In the room, Xiaoyi-chen also rushed out with his cell phone. However, he saw Yu standing at the entrance. When he turned around, the two little lads looked at each other. "Where's mommy?" "She went to work." Xiaoyi-chen leaned over and asked worriedly, "Have you seen Weibo?" "What?" "It's this." Xiaoyi-chen immediately put the cell phone in front of him. Yu glanced at it and his face suddenly turned cold. Chapter 2452. What should we do? Could the woman in the photo be mommy? Yu slapped his face speechlessly and pushed him away. "You can't even recognize your own mommy. Drag him out and behead him." With that, he turned around and walked away, seemingly forgetting that he had mistaken his own mommy for someone else. When Xiaoyi-chen heard this, he came to his senses and pestered him. "I knew it. Mommy would never meet another man behind daddy's back. But this woman really looks like mommy." When Yu heard this, he suddenly turned to face him and raised his eyebrows. "You think they look alike too?" "Yeah, very alike. Very alike." I broke out in a cold sweat just looking at them. Yu furrowed his eyebrows worriedly. Indeed, the resemblance was too great. If this matter blew up, it would not be good for mommy. Yu rubbed his chin and muttered, "I don't know where this woman came from, but judging from her figure, she looks like a young model in the internet celebrity circle. Maybe it's just like mommy's face." "Plastic surgery? Oh right. Why didn't I think of that?" Xiaoyi-chen slapped his head in frustration and said gloomily, "I forgot that there's such a thing as plastic surgery. Didn't Brother Hua Jin say yesterday that he saw Gu Xingze entering a hotel with a woman? Maybe it's this woman." Yu stopped abruptly. Xiaoyi-chen did not know, but he knew that Gu Xingze seemed to be deeply in love with mommy. Could it be Huanyu Building? In Ji Lin's office, Qin Zhou threw a stack of documents on the table. His face was ashen. "Xingze, this rascal, he's simply messing around." Ji Lin leaned back in his chair and sized him up calmly. He asked, "Have you found out about this woman?" "Yeah, according to the information. She's a young model who just debuted. Her name is something like Li Xian. TSK. What a gaudy name." Qin Zhou sat down on the sofa with his legs crossed. After a moment of silence, he said, "I've found her information, including some information about her background." "Which agency did she sign with?" Qin Zhou replied in disdain. "Ease is a modeling agency backed by American Airlines. On the surface it sounds dignified, but in reality it's just a sex agency. Most of the models signed by it are high-class public relations professionals who specialize in signing peripheral girls. The average cost is 50,000 yuan per night. The company's official website put the photos of these models on the homepage. On the surface it was to show off their style, but in reality these models were clearly priced. High-class prostitute? Not entirely. However, most of them were in the mud. This Li Xianer just debuted not long ago. I don't know what methods she used to get close to Xingzhe. I don't know what her motive is. Is this model clean? It's pretty clean. He's just entered the industry and doesn't know anything. Now that this has happened, he's probably scared out of his wits. Thinking of this, Qin Zhou was furious. Had Gu Xingzhe fallen? How could he play with a young model? Although this young model had just debuted and was considered clean, he couldn't just mess around with a face that was specially made to look like Yun Shishir. When did he become so frivolous? Now that this incident has happened, I'm in a bit of a dilemma. I don't know if I should clarify or not. Incident. Chapter 2453. What do you mean? Look at the photos that were taken secretly. Although it's a little blurry, if they didn't know their whereabouts beforehand, they definitely wouldn't have been able to take such a clear shot of their faces. If I'm not wrong, this paparazzi was probably hired by Ease. Qin Zhou was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He sighed and said, I'm also worried about this. Jilin gently knocked on the table and said expressionlessly, if this entertainment company is smart, they will probably bribe the media and create a series of articles. There were two ways to create hype in the entertainment industry. The first way was to tie up relationships or create hype with topics. For example, previously, there was a celebrity couple who spent a huge sum of 200 million on their wedding. The wedding was so grand that it was comparable to the wedding of a royal family. It was called the wedding of the century. But in reality, many of the 200 million wedding were sponsored by investors. They valued the celebrity couple's influence and wanted to create a big scene. The more famous the couple was, the more money the investors would make. Not only did this couple not invest much in the wedding, but they also used the wedding to create hype. The female celebrity directly became an A-lister, and her popularity soared. The wedding was hyped up until the end of the wedding. The couple used the remaining effects to create hype for a month. Many people were envious and called the man the perfect husband. They were extremely envious of the female lead. Both parties benefited from the wedding. The audience was the ones who were fooled. The other way to create hype was to use one's own negative reputation to create hype. Jilin and Qin Zhou were a little worried. They were worried that this young model named Li Xianer would be manipulated by the company. They were worried that Yun Shishir would be used as a springboard to create hype with the fame of Little Yun Shishir. Not only that, they could also use the exposure of the hotel door scandal to create hype with Gu Xingzhe's influence. When Yun Shishir arrived at the company, Qin Zhou and Jilin summoned her to the director's office. In the office, a few key personnel from the public relations department were also present. Everyone was on high alert and the atmosphere was tense. She was scared out of her wits when she saw this scene. What happened? Qin Zhou glanced at her and said in annoyance, Shishir, the hotel incident between you and Xingzhe has already caused a ruckus on Weibo, yet you're still so calm. It's really the case that the eunuchs are more worried than the emperor. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Isn't the woman in the photo me? Haven't you issued a clarification statement yet? Qin Zhou said gloomily. Clarify? Right now it was no longer a question of whether or not to clarify. Now I would rather you be the heroine of this story. You've been checkmated, do you know that? Yun Shishir was stunned and looked at him blankly. When I saw that Weibo post this morning, to be honest, I was also very surprised. I don't know if this woman had plastic surgery, but her face is very similar to mine. After a pause, she continued, even if she came out of the hotel, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something going on between her and Xingzhe, right? She came out of the hotel alone, but that's not important. The point is, she walked into the hotel with her arm around Xingzhe's arm. This was also captured by the media and is now the talk of the town. Chapter 2454. Then what should we do now? We'll bide our time for now. Let's see if the technical department can find the information I want. What information? Jilin suddenly said. The photos of this woman before her plastic surgery. Qin Zhou suddenly urged. Anyway, don't panic. You still have to prepare for an interview in the morning, so go and do your makeup first. Yoon Shurshur nodded and turned to leave. Just as she left, Mushi suddenly rushed in and raised the tablet to the manager, saying indignantly, "Boss Chin, Lee Siener opened her Weibo account 5 minutes ago and posted a photo of herself along with a statement." He hurriedly took the tablet from her. The image on the tablet stopped at Lee Siener's Weibo. In just 5 minutes, the company had already given her a verified title. It seemed that the company had been planning this for a long time. Model? Actress? Chin Zhou asked doubtfully. Actress? Had she ever acted before? The highlight was the newly posted Weibo post. She had posted a photo, which was strangely familiar. Yoon Shurshur had done a similar photoshoot before. This Lee Siener had probably imitated Yoon Shurshur's photoshoot. It seemed that she was trying to imitate Yoon Shurshur's style to the end. The photo was indeed in the style of a flower fairy. The pink dress she was wearing was exactly the same as the one Yoon Shurshur had done before. Even the flower crown on her head was the same. Not only that, the composition, rendering, posture, and even expression were exactly the same. Only the background was slightly different, but the style was still the same. The announcement she had posted and a series of statements openly admitted that she was the real female lead of the hotel door. Although her words were high-sounding in the statement, she only admitted that she and Gu Xingze were friends and that they had only chatted in the hotel and did nothing else. Putting aside what had happened between her and Gu Xingze for the time being, the two of them had entered the hotel together. Her statement would only make it seem that she was trying to cover it up, and the public would only interpret it as a deliberate cover-up. The wording of the statement was extremely innocent and aggrieved. The style of a living white lotus was vivid on paper. The fans were quite shocked when they heard this news. Gosh! It turned out that the female lead of this incident wasn't Yoon Shurshur but someone else. Where did this Lee Siener come from, though? They had never heard of her. A nameless model with certification as an actress and model. More importantly, she had not appeared in any films or TV shows. She didn't even have a supporting role. At this point, the fans felt unbalanced. They suddenly regretted it. They would rather the female lead of this incident was Yoon Shurshur than this woman of unknown origin. What was even more infuriating was that Lee Seonger insisted that she did not have plastic surgery, nor did she copy Yoon Shurshur's looks. Her looks were natural, and she even hinted that the reason why the two looked alike was probably due to Yoon Shurshur's plastic surgery, which resulted in them coincidentally meeting each other's looks. Shameless. Sure enough, within minutes of the Weibo post being posted, the number of comments and reposts had exceeded 10,000. Many fans of Yoon Shurshur and Gu Xingze ran to the Weibo comments section to curse. But this was the effect that ease wanted. Chapter 2455. This was also one of the tricks used to create hype. First, they would use a black mark to create hype and attract attention. Once they became famous, they would use other means to appear innocent and pitiful on shows to clear their names. Usually, the audience would not be hostile to beautiful people. Hence, the prettier a female artiste was, the easier it was for them to clear their names. However, Chin Zhou quickly calmed down. Having been in this industry for so long, he had seen all kinds of storms. He had seen too many of such tricks, so he did not find it strange. Mushi, on the other hand, was furious. When she saw Lee Siener open a Weibo account, she was so angry that she almost smashed her tablet. How shameless! This woman is simply a white lotus. She clearly had plastic surgery based on Yoon Shurshur's features. Yet this woman still refuses to admit it. Not only does she refuse to admit it, but she even opened a Weibo account and posted a statement. It's obvious that she wants to use Shurshur to create hype. Shurshur alone is not enough. She even wants to drag Xingze into this and create hype together. She's aiming for Xingze and Shurshur's popularity. I'm about to die from anger. The corners of Chin Zhou's lips twitched as his facial muscles stiffened. Xingze, that rascal, is too ridiculous. Mushi asked curiously, is there any reaction from Xingze's side? Is there any movement from his studio? Chin Zhou said coldly, Xingze must remain silent. This is the best way to deal with this crisis. He must deal with scandals that are unfavorable to him coldly. The more he tries to explain and clarify, the more chaotic it will be. Why? As an Idols fan, the fans hope to see Gu Xingze, the person involved in this incident, Stand up and give an explanation. However, this explanation can only be valid. Now that Gu Xingze can't give a valid explanation, he can only remain silent. Otherwise, the situation will be even more chaotic. I'm so angry. Mu Shi was about to cry from anger. I've never seen such a shameless woman. In this circle, there are many shameless people. Then what should we do next? Mu Shi huffed. Don't tell me we're just going to let this woman use Shirshir to create hype? Judging from the other company's stance, it's obvious that they're not letting go of Shirshir. Qin Zhou also found it troublesome. Although Shirshir is not a A-lister now, she's very popular. If she's involved with this woman, it'll only appear degrading. That's why we're not making any moves for now and see how things will develop. That's too. I was bitten by a dog while walking. If I bite it back, it will be very degrading. After Yun's interview with Yun's Shirshir. However, after they sat down and exchanged a few pleasantries, the editor went straight to the point and brought up Li Xiang. Shirshir, what do you think of Li Xiang? You don't know about this? The editor was very surprised. This morning, Chengguang Entertainment published a set of photos on Weibo. The model who went in and out of the hotel with Gu Xingze is called Li Xian. Oh. Yun Shirshir nodded. Frowning slightly, she calmly asked, May I ask if this matter has anything to do with this interview? Chapter 2456. The editor was slightly embarrassed and said, You and Xingzhe were voted as the most popular on-screen couple. Previously, during the filming of The Love Diary, the fans have been talking about your chemistry with Xingzhe. The lucky couple is very popular, isn't it? Even I think that you and Xingzhe are a good match. You've also mentioned that on-screen couple is only on-screen, so there's no need to magnify it to reality. Xingzhe is a very outstanding senior. As a junior, I have no right to comment on his personal life. If Li Xianer is his lover, I'll also give them my sincere blessings. His flawless answer left everyone dumbfounded. Mu Shi smiled from the side. Let's put this topic aside for now. The main topic of today's interview is Shirshir's new drama and Lethal Beauty, which is about to be broadcasted on major satellite channels. Let's skip some irrelevant topics. Despite the editor's dissatisfaction, he had no choice but to put this topic aside. After the interview, Mu Shi said unhappily, Shirshir, I really feel aggrieved for you. That Li Xianer is using you as a springboard to hype herself up. I really can't take it lying down. This is the industry. If you want to establish yourself, you have to learn to face these unspoken rules. With that, she added, we still have a pictorial shoot in the afternoon. Let's go for lunch. Yun Shirshir made an appointment with Qin Zhou and Ji Lin, and the four of them went to a restaurant next to the company for lunch. The atmosphere was low during the meal. Qin Zhou was still scrolling through Weibo, his expression ugly. Even Ji Lin, who had always been exceptionally calm, had his brows tightly knitted together. Clearly, the current situation was not optimistic. Yun Shirshir ordered noodles, but she kept fiddling with the noodles in her bowl with her chopsticks as if she was chewing wax. Weibo was in an uproar. Li Xianer's Weibo post this morning had already reached 150,000 comments. There were countless scolding below, but Li Xianer seemed indifferent and did not make any further comments. This was also a common method of creating hype. The more one did not make a statement, the more attention and anger they would attract. Mu Shi was a little worried. How long will this situation last? Qin Zhou drank a glass of wine in annoyance and put his phone aside. I'm not afraid of ruthless people, but I'm afraid of shameless people. This was the truth. Ji Lin said. Let's put this matter aside for now. Take care of yourself. Later we'll think of some countermeasures. Qin Zhou pondered for a moment and suddenly said, However, if Li Xianer insists on creating hype, I don't mind playing along. A glimmer of hope appeared on her face. What do you mean? Qin Zhou replied. She will definitely be using Shirshir to create hype. Similarly, Shirshir will also be using her to create more exposure. Yun Shirshir was silent for a long time. Suddenly, she swallowed a mouthful of noodles and sighed. When Gu Xingze arrived at the studio, it was in a state of chaos. Upon seeing him, they greeted him with trepidation. Master Gu. After he terminated his contract with Qin Zhou, he set up his own studio. before he came back because he was banned, many veterans left. Therefore, the public relations aspect of the crisis was extremely weak. Until now, these guys still hadn't come up with a complete plan. Chapter 2457. Gu Xingze was also clear that there was a team behind this. Li Xian'er's company also wanted to make use of this incident to create hype. It was not easy for a modeling company to produce a celebrity. Most of them were not popular. If the transition was successful, they might be able to get a small role in a script. If the transition was not successful, they could only become the playthings of those rich people. Once the shelf life was over, they could only be eliminated. Some of them would marry rich businessmen, and some would leave the industry. It was not easy to produce Li Xian'er. He went to his office and closed the door. He suddenly felt upset when he thought of the heated discussion on Weibo. Until now, what bothered him the most was not his reputation, nor was it the impact on his popularity. His mind was filled with Yun Shishir's cold and detached gaze. After this incident, what kind of eyes would she use to look at him? He actually cared a lot about what she thought. Would she think of him as a frivolous person? Or would she think of him as the scum of the entertainment industry? He cared a lot. However, there had been no news from Yun Shishir. With Qin Zhou in charge, she would definitely choose to bide her time. However, he had seen Yun Shishir's live interview in the morning. She seemed to be very indifferent about this incident, even indifferent. She had completely distanced herself from it. He actually felt a little lonely. In the afternoon, Yun Shishir had a set of pictorials to shoot. This set of pictorials was specially invited by the magazine. Moreover, the country's top photographer would be in charge of the overall situation. Yun Shishir and the photographer talked for a while. The final result of the discussion was that they would use mermaids as the script and concept to shoot a set of underwater pictorials for the magazine. The styling team brought a few clothes. One was white and the other was red. The photographer chose the red one for her. He said that the red one would definitely look amazing in the photos. The makeup artist styled her soft black hair and put on heavy retro makeup. Her facial features were very soft and had a classic charm. Therefore, retro makeup was very suitable for her, especially her red lips. It was February and the weather was still a little cold. Although they chose a pool with a constant temperature, Yun Shishir was still shivering when she went into the water in a light dress. The photographer let her get used to the water temperature, and then followed her into the water. Shooting in bed was a test of one's figure. What was amazing was that Yun Shishir's performance was excellent. She followed the photographer's instructions and made many seductive poses underwater. She was as enchanting and beautiful as the daughter of the sea god. The dark blue water and the bright red dress complemented each other. Yun Shishir's exquisite makeup, black hair, silky eyes and eyelashes were intertwined with her hair. When she looked back and smiled, her lips were red and her teeth were white. She was very seductive, yet she had the aura of a queen. At the end of the shoot, the photographer held the camera as if he had found a treasure and browsed through the photos one by one. He was so excited that he was speechless. Yun Shishir, who was floating in the water, smiled knowingly at his praise. Shishir, it's been hard on you. After the shoot, Mushi immediately took a blanket and draped it over her. She then helped her to the changing room and hurriedly changed her wet clothes. Chapter 2458. The cameraman praised you for your good performance. I took a few looks at the photos. The effect is really great. The effect is good, but I also paid quite a price. Yun Shishir said softly. Although the water is at a constant temperature, it's also very cold. I'm freezing to death. Especially after coming out of the pool, when the wind blew slightly, it was bone-chilling. There was still a show to record at night. Just thinking about it gave Yun Shishir a splitting headache and made her feel dizzy. The show was a first-tier satellite TV variety show with the ACE ratings, A-Star Alliance. In order to cater to the audience, there were many small segments about physical fitness. Most of the guests who participated in the show were there to promote their movies or TV series. This time, the production team of Lethal Beauty wanted to promote the new drama. So the main creators, including Hua Jin, were participating in the show. Yun Shishir was originally mentally prepared. But when she arrived at the scene, the production team said that there was a segment where they would have to wear very heavy sumo wrestling props. Different celebrities would be divided into 2 groups and compete against each other. When Yoon Shurshur saw the props, her eyes dimmed even more. It was so heavy. It must be very heavy to wear. Yoon Shurshur went on stage in a daze. During the recording of the show, when it came to the game segment, she wore the sumo wrestling outfit and appeared on stage. She looked very heavy but also very cute. The celebrities were divided into 2 groups. Yoon Shurshur realized that most of the celebrities in her group were thinner and weaker, while the other group's celebrities were more strong. She protested. There's an imbalance in strength. We're all old and weak. It's not fair. Her protest caused the audience to roar with laughter. Hua Jin was in the same group as her. When he heard that, he was dealt a huge blow and protested. What do you mean old and weak? I protest. Yoon Shurshur kicked him to the ground. The audience roared with laughter again. Even the MC was amused by Yoon Shurshur's variety show talent. Then do we need to change the lineup? Hua Jin said, no need. Our Shurshur is our team's carry. With Shurshur as our trump card, we'll definitely win. Yoon Shurshur felt that she had been unjustly implicated. At the start of the game, the host announced on the spot that the celebrity who won the game would donate 5 million yuan to the charity organization in the name of the team. This was a great honor. Yoon Shurshur originally didn't want to continue fighting, but when she heard that there was such a meaningful reward, her fighting spirit was ignited. In the end, what made everyone not know whether to laugh or cry was that everyone thought that Hua Jin's Shurshur is our trump card was just a joke. Who would have thought that Shurshur's fighting strength was on the verge of exploding? She rampaged all the way, and even a male guest with a more muscular body was pushed out of the circle by her. Everyone was dumbfounded. At this time, only Hua Jin and Yoon Shurshur were left in the arena. Yoon Shurshur looked proud and arrogant as she asked, "Who else wants to fight?" The host immediately gave her the title of Desperate 13th Lady. Hua Jin stood up and revealed, "Don't underestimate Shurshur. She ate 2 of my meals on set." Ha 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 ha. The guests were convulsing with laughter. Xiaoi Chen and Yu Yu were overjoyed as they watched the live broadcast. Ha ha ha. Mommy is so funny. Xiaoi Chen said, "Do you have to fight so hard? You don't even have a ladylike image anymore." Mommy isn't ladylike in the first place, okay? If Mommy hears you, she'll beat you up. Chapter 2459. When Yoon Shurshur returned home after filming, Yu Yu and Xiaoi Chen immediately welcomed her. Madam 13 is home. When Yoon Shurshur heard this nickname, her eyes twitched and her face darkened. She knew that the 2 little guys must have watched the live broadcast of her show. She said angrily, "Don't give Mommy a nickname." Yu Yu said pitifully, "Mommy, I'm innocent. The host gave you this nickname, not Yu Yu." Seeing how pitiful he looked, Yoon Shurshur could not help but pinch his cheeks and ask, "Is Daddy home?" "Yeah." In the study. When Yoon Shurshur walked into the study, she saw Wuxia sitting in front of the computer and staring at the screen intently. She walked over curiously and saw that he was watching the replay of her show with great interest. It happened to play the scene where she was playing a game. She was wearing a cumbersome sumo suit and charging into the enemy camp like a bull. She immediately blushed and blocked the screen. She said gloomily, "Stop watching. This is for the show's effect. I'm not that barbaric." Wuxia smiled and grabbed her wrist, pulling her into his arms. "Why are you back so late? The show should have finished filming a long time ago." "Yeah, I had supper with the crew after filming." "What did you eat?" "Seafood porridge." Yoon Shurshur suddenly thought of something and asked, "Have you seen Weibo?" "Weibo?" Wuxia was stunned. He quickly realized what she was talking about and replied, "Yeah, I saw it. I saw it. It was very exciting." Yoon Shurshur said pitifully, "Don't get the wrong idea. The woman in the photos in the Weibo post this morning is not me." The first thing she did when she got home was to explain things to him. She had left in a hurry in the morning. If she explained, it would seem too deliberate. Although she felt that this incident had nothing to do with her, she also knew that Wuxia could tell at a glance that the woman in the photos was not her. But after all, it involved her and Gu Xingze. When Li Xianer hyped up the news, it would inevitably lead to other media outlets hyping up the scandal between her and Gu Xingze. She was worried that he would overthink when he saw those messy reports and hype. Moreover, She did not want to implicate Gu Xingze again. This man's methods had always been ruthless. If she angered him, she might be banned again. Muyaja grabbed her chin and kissed her fair cheek. He hummed again, but this time, his tone was full of tenderness. I know, you don't have to explain yourself. I'm afraid you'll think too much. She didn't care much about this incident, but she cared more about his feelings. Muyaja said, I'm not as stupid as you think. All right. It's good that you're not thinking too much. Yun Shishir heaved a sigh of relief and slumped in his arms. I'm so tired today. Dearest hubby, can you massage my shoulders? Your shoulders are sore. Muyaja was nervous for a moment. Seeing her tired face, he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He immediately lifted his hand and massaged her shoulders obediently. He was quite strong. Yun Shishir mumbled, Be gentler. Yep. He was also afraid that he would hurt her petite body, so he used less strength. Here. Okay. And here, a little to the left. Yeah. Use a little more strength. Aya, it's so sore. Chapter 2460. Yun Shishir was able to order a certain man around with ease. His grip was just right and she couldn't help but let out a few soft moans of pleasure. He saw that her intoxicated look was just too moving, too cute, and he couldn't help but lightly peck her cheek. This intimate action was bumped into by the two little lads who had snuck into the study. Yu and Xiaoyichen were the best at catching adulterers. Muyaja's face froze. Yu's eyes widened in surprise. Then she ran over enviously and complained, Daddy, you're biased. My back was itchy just now, but you didn't even want to scratch it. Xiaoyichen said enviously, Mommy seems to be very comfortable. Daddy, you should massage my shoulders too. Yun Shishir's eyes twitched and she said, Mommy is very tired after working for the whole day. Okay? Humph. Yu placed her hands on her hips and said self-righteously, Yu has been doing housework for the whole day, so she's very tired too, okay? When Xiaoyichen heard this, he also placed his hands on his hips and said unreasonably, Xiaoyichen has been playing for the whole day, so his shoulders are sore too. Yu and Yun Shishir were silent. They glared at him in disdain and said, You think you're in the right after playing for the whole day? Yu immediately took action. She cupped her fists and cracked her knuckles. Muichen, you still have the cheek to say that? You only know how to play games when I asked you to mop the floor. You want a massage, right? I'll let you have a taste of my fist. As she said this, she grabbed Xiaoyichen's collar. Xiaoyichen was so shocked that he cried out, Yu, you're a bully. Then he ran out of the study. Yu chased after him. Muichen, you big idiot. Don't run. Yun Shishir and Muyaja stared dumbfoundedly at the two boys making a ruckus. They stared blankly for a moment before looking at each other and laughing. They really are two living treasures. Yun Shishir said with emotion. With these two clowns at home, there was no need to worry about loneliness. Sometimes when she came back from work feeling exhausted, these two little lads always had the ability to heal her heart. With just a few words, even if it was just a look, they would always be able to sweep away the haze in her heart. Do you feel better? He asked softly. The gentleness in his eyes warmed her heart. Yun Shishir nodded and said, Much better. My shoulders aren't so sore anymore. Thank you, husband. Muyaja gently rested his chin on the side of her shoulder and quietly hugged her. In this quiet moment, he only wanted to quietly hug her and gently kiss her. His attachment to her always showed itself unconsciously. Sometimes even he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He even found it unbelievable. He originally thought that after getting married, their feelings would be like those of married couples, going from intense to dull. However, this feeling didn't fade at all. Instead, it became even more intense and difficult to suppress. What Yun Shishir didn't know was that even though he looked so calm when he married her, his heart was like a blooming firework. His feelings for her filled his chest, and he was deeply in love with her. At that time there were 4 words that kept repeating in his mind. He was married. He was married. Yes, he had a home. When he returned home, he had a wife and a pair of adorable sons. This was a life that he could only look forward to. This joy still hadn't faded even now. Chapter 2461. At moments and corners where she couldn't see, he would always secretly take out the marriage certificate as if he was possessed and look at it again and again. He would stare at the photo of the two people leaning against each other in a daze. Unknowingly, a smile would always appear in his eyes. If Yoon Shurshur knew that he always carried the marriage certificate with him, she would definitely have a whole new level of respect for this man. Even Loo Jinyu had seen it a few times. In the office when he was free from work, he would take out the small red book from his pocket and look at it. Loo Jinyu secretly said to Jiang Shun, "Boss seems to be possessed by something." When Jiang Shun found out, he secretly gave Muyaja the title of a wife-slave behind his back. Wife-slave? Loo Jinyu shook his head and said, "You didn't see boss smiling foolishly at the marriage certificate. It scared me." Jiang Shun was in a mess. Muyaja didn't seem to realize that ever since they got married, he seemed to be becoming more and more of a wife-slave. Yoon Shurshur was originally worried that after they got married, this man would think that since they were already married, he wouldn't cherish her anymore. But what about the opposite? He cherished her more and more, because he was always thinking about her. She was his wife, his legitimate wife. If he didn't pamper her, who else would pamper her? It was precisely because of this awareness that Muyaja displayed the demeanor of a wife-slave, that Loo Jinyu and Jiang Shun were taken aback. He also understood that the marriage certificate wasn't just a piece of paper. They were clearly married, but they were still like young men and women in their honeymoon period. Even though they had only parted in the morning and hadn't seen each other for a day, they already missed each other very much. During the afternoon meeting, even though he was sitting in the conference room, he seemed distracted. Hence, he specially returned home early to wait for her return. Where was the husband gazing stone? However, the husband of the husband gazing stone was referring to his wife. Now that he was holding her in his arms, when her petite body filled his chest, his heart suddenly calmed down. It was as if this was the only way he could feel the real her and her warmth. Yoon Shurshur also thought to herself that after they got married, a certain man seemed to be more clingy to her. Was this a good thing? At this moment, Muyaja also had the same thought in his heart. When will my wife give birth to a little princess for me? Hubby. You said. Yoon Shurshur suddenly said awkwardly, "Is the plastic surgery technology really so advanced now?" Muyaja was still immersed in his fantasies about his little princess, so he only vaguely heard the words plastic surgery. He asked curiously, "Plastic surgery?" Yes. It was the Weibo post from this morning. The woman in the photo was called Li Xianer. Qin Zhou searched for her photo and she really looked like me. Qin Zhou said that she must have gotten plastic surgery based on me. But can plastic surgery really make you look like me? If the original mold is similar, it's not impossible to make it exactly the same. Upon hearing this, Yoon Shurshur's expression became even uglier. Her face had been used as a template, and then a woman who looked so much like her had appeared out of nowhere. No matter how she thought about it, she felt uncomfortable and even awkward. The Weibo post from this morning. Chapter 2462. You also think that the woman looks like me, right? Muyaja shook his head and said confidently, "How can I mistake my old skin for someone else? I don't think they look alike at all." How is that possible? Yoon Shurshur obviously did not believe him. Qin Zhou, Yu and Xiaoichen thought it was me at first glance. I'm the one who shares a bed with you every day. How can I mistake my wife for someone else? Muyaja said. Besides, although they look alike, their temperament is obviously different. Temperament? Yes. She doesn't have your temperament. Therefore, even if she has the same looks, she doesn't look outstanding. It was 30% looks and 70% temperament. A person's temperament was more important than their looks. Yoon Shurshur's temperament was very good. Just like her name, Yoon Shurshur was poetic, elegant and elegant. Yoon Shurshur's heart instantly brightened up when she heard this. She turned around and pinched his cheeks with a smile. You really know how to talk. Regardless of whether he was coaxing her or telling the truth, she was almost dizzy from his words. However, this beautiful mood didn't last for too long. The next day, Li Xianer's management company went all out to create hype. In Qin Zhou's words, it was simply crazy. Good move. What a good move. Qin Zhou slammed a stack of files on the table and said angrily, This Li Xianer is really shameless. What's wrong? Yoon Shurshur was putting on her makeup when she saw Qin Zhou's angry eyes. She was a little confused. What's wrong with Li Xian? The management company she signed with signed a publicity team the night before yesterday. This publicity team is really good at creating hype. They actually posted Lee Siener's photos online. Isn't this what you want? Yoon Shirshir asked curiously. Haven't you been looking for photos of her before her plastic surgery? I did find a photo of her before her plastic surgery. But Ease released a press release before Hwan Yu did. The difference is huge. If I release a statement, I will guide the public opinion in a direction that is beneficial to you. However, the hype team had purposely chosen a few selfies that looked better before her plastic surgery. Then, as soon as they released the article, Lee Siener came out to deny that she had undergone plastic surgery. She even said that she wanted to go to the hospital for a DNA test. Then, she said that she wanted to sue the Weibo media who had slandered her. Their way of praising and trampling on her was really top-notch. Just the topic of plastic surgery alone is enough for Lee Siener to hype up for a while. Isn't she afraid of getting a bad reputation by doing this? So what if he has a bad reputation? Who would care about that little bit of reputation? As long as one was famous, regardless of whether the reputation was good or bad, the more outlandish and shameless one was, the more attention the public would pay. The more attention there was, the more exposure there would be. Lee Siener just exposed this hype yesterday. But this morning, there were many satellite channels looking for her to do a show. This is the effect of hype. In the entertainment industry, there were many female celebrities who did not hesitate to make a fool of themselves by deliberately making disgusting comments to gain exposure and fame. There were also many female celebrities who were more direct and became famous overnight. The entertainment industry was in a mess because of these immoral celebrities. After all, fame and wealth were often unscrupulous.